I call this meeting to order at 7:30 p.m. How's everyone doing? Good stuff. Okay, we'll move to section 2 roll call. Clerk Carter.
With 26 members present, a simple majority is 14 and 2/3 majority is 18.
And now we move to 3.1, messages from the student body president. Clerk Carter.
Executive Order 67-013. By order of the student body president, Kylie Hauer. Whereas on September 25th, President Hauer signed Executive Order 67-012, forming the task force on SGA funding to establish a task force designed to investigate the policy behind SGA funding to ensure we are set up better for the present and future. Whereas, since signing this executive order, we have decided that moving forward, it would be more beneficial to the mission of Student Government Association that we include agency representatives rather than student government organization representatives in order to reach a broader demographic. Now, therefore, pursuant the authority vested in me as the president of the association by the Constitution and the laws of the Wichita State University Student Government Association, I hereby direct and order the following. Action 1. Amend Line 7 of Action 2 of Executive Order 67-012 to read, up to 8 agency representatives appointed by the chair. This order shall be filed with the association's office, added to the record, and it shall become effective upon my filing and remain in force until rescinded by the president of the association or following other procedures. This order shall become executive law and special ordered to remain beyond the session. Executive Order 67-014, by order of the student body president, Kylie Hauer. Whereas the purpose of the Health and Wellness Commission is to give students the chance to provide input on the Steve Clark YMCA, student health services, counseling and prevention services, and campus recreation coordination and identity long-term service needs. Now, therefore, pursuant the authority vested in me as president of the association by the Constitution and laws of the Wichita State University Student Government Association, I hereby direct and order the following. Action 1. Appoint Wellness and Sustainability Director Emery Hadley to serve as the chair of the commission. Action 2. Appoint Chief of Staff Xavier Westbrook to serve as the clerk of the commission. Action 3. Appoint Student Body Vice President Matthew Fawn to the commission. Action 4. Appoint Sawyer Kirkland to serve as the undergraduate student representative to the commission. Action 5. Appoint Cynthia Pizzini to serve as the adult learner representative to the commission. Action 6. Appoint Donna Tran to serve as the graduate representative to the commission. Action 7. Appoint Annie Wassinger to serve as the student advocate representative to the commission. And Action 8. Appoint Vice President of Student Affairs Dr. Terry Hall to serve as the student affairs representative to the commission. Action 9, appoint Dr. Jessica Provines to serve as the Counseling and Provision Services Representative to the Commission. Action 10, appoint Katie Davidson to serve as the Care Team Representative to the Commission. Action 11, appoint Isabel Medine Kaiser to serve as the Disability Services Representative to the Commission. Action 12, appoint Heather Stafford to serve as the Student Health Services Representative to the Commission. Action 13, appoint John Lee to serve as the Campus Recreation Student Representative to the Commission. Action 14, appoint Elizabeth Hardyway to serve as the Steve Clark YMCA representative to the Commission. And Action 15, appoint Abby Whistler as the Association's advisor's designee to the Commission. This order shall be filed with the Association office, added to the record, and shall become effective upon filing and remain in force until rescinded by the President of the Association or following other procedures. This order shall become executive law and special ordered to remain beyond the session.
Thank you. Now we move to 3.2, report from the executive branch, Vice President Fawn.
Good evening, everyone. I hope your week has gone well so far. Last Wednesday, President Hauer and I met with the Intercollegiate Athletics Association, and as a board, they talked about the athletics audit, future goals and initiatives, concerns that students had about premium seating as an advisory board. Last week, we met with our Chief of Staff, Zach Gearhart, for our monthly meeting. This week, we also met with the Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Hall, and Provost Lefevre for our monthly meeting also. In those meetings with Dr. Hall and Provost Lefevre, we talked about parking improvements, student feedback, the pickleball courts, and the program reviews that are coming up before the Kansas Board of Regents. Last Thursday was the SGA Town Hall, where President Muma, Provost Lefevre, and Dr. Hall joined us. If you watched it, the university's master plan, future and current construction, campus safety, and DEI were some of the things that were discussed. If you wish to watch it, back at a later date, it should be on the YouTube channel. The parking committee will meet for the first time tomorrow, where we will discuss proposed changes and feedback for parking throughout the committee. Please let me know if you have any feedback, concerns, or possible changes that you would like me to share with the committee. I'm open to suggestions. I'm sure many people on the parking committee will be interested to hear concerns that students may have. For the Director of International Student Affairs, Director Munjay, he had a meeting with Chakra Career Accelerator on October 29th about having a guest speaker event for international students. The event will feature alumni who achieve industry success, and the goal will be to offer international students insight into career development and to navigate sponsorship challenges. It is currently planned to be in late February, but they are still working on getting guest speakers. He is also planning to meet with Brett Bruner on November 11th to discuss securing academic affairs funding for a mentorship program that will plan to connect new international students with peer mentors to aid with cultural and academic transitions. He is also working with the Shocker Support Locker to improve access within housing, residential halls during winter break closures to ensure that international students have essential resources over the break when campus services are reduced. For Director Hadley, as you heard, we had an executive order appointing members to the Health and Wellness Commission, so we are really excited to get that started up and running again. For our Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs, Arns, she is working on K-Board preparation for our Higher Ed Day and our next K-Board visit in the next few weeks. And then I yield the rest of my time to the graduate and undergraduate advocates to give their own presentation.
Introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Donna Tran and I am the Graduate Student Advocate for SGA.
Hi guys, I'm Annie Wassiner. I am the undergraduate student advocate, and this will just be a little bit of our advocate report on today's date, which is the 6th. You can click to the next slide. Okay, perfect. Okay, so these are our active cases. So active cases means that we are currently in contact with these students. They have an open file on Maxient, which is our reporting system, same reporting system we use for conduct and for care team. And it just essentially means for some of these students, they're waiting on their academic hearing, their appeals hearing. They've asked us to attend. So we keep those cases open until they've been resolved. One of these is a traffic appeal, so again, we're waiting for the appeal to actually go through. There are a couple other students who are gathering materials, and there's one student who's preparing a referendum for a parking ticket. So that's a little bit about our active cases. And we'll go to our caseload. So when I came into this position I came in May, but I didn't get Maxient access until about June. And when I came in, there were already cases under my caseload of students I'd never met. So essentially what happens there is because of the way that we elect the president, and then the president then appoints the student advocate, there are students who file in like May or April after they realize that they have gotten an unfair grade, and that grade can't be appealed until the next cycle. So we can't appeal until like August. So there were a couple cases, I think maybe 5 cases that were left over from, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting her name, not Tatum, I was thinking, Ashlyn Gark. There were a couple from her caseload. So that's what those like June and July ones are gonna be. And then the rest of these really just came up, some in August, some in September, and then we had a couple in October, and we've already had one case in November, which was a parking case. So this is about how many students we've had reach out to us, and this is specifically through our Maxient system. So there are still people who like email us individually, and we may assist them. But these are the people who have like formal cases open with the Maxient system.
Kind of moving on into the next couple of slides. These are just going to kind of breaking down where these cases are coming from. So our first one is going to be cases by classification and or year in school. There are 2 from the graduate school, 3 from first-year students, 1 from second-year students, 7 from third-year students, and 6 from fourth-year students. Looking at the cases by the college, 2 from the School of Business, 2 from Applied Studies, 1 from the College of Engineering, 1 from the College of Fine Arts, 3 coming from the College of Health Professions, 2 from the Graduate School, 7 from Liberal Arts and Sciences, and 1 unspecified/anonymous. So with that one, whoever put in that case or report chose not to specify what school they are a part of. Cases by issue or concern, we have 1 specified as other, 7 from parking, 1 from traffic, 2 from specifically just academic appeals, and the 8 with multiple or various, they had multiple concerns or issues that they wanted to report on, some including but are not limited to academic misunderstanding with faculty/advisor, financial concern, harassment/discrimination, issues with university staff members. So with those, they had multiple concerns. Not all of those cases included those issues, but that just kind of gives us an idea of what those look like.
Okay, then, sorry, we have our cases by closure reasons. Geez, that's a hard word. Okay, so as you can see, we still have the 5 open cases, so those haven't been closed. Then we have 2 that are referred, so those are specific times when Advocate Tran and I have like exacerbated all of the things that we can do, and we have sent them forward, which would be like the referendum. So we've sent the referendum to 2 different students, so those represent the referred students, which basically just means we'll assist them with the referendum, but other than that, there's nothing that our office can do. The 9 responsive cases are those students were in contact with us, they agreed to close the case, they wanted the case closed for whatever reason, and it could have been like a good resolution or a bad resolution. And then non-responsive is students that I tried extremely hard to contact. I kept their cases open for an unnecessary amount of time, and I tried very hard to contact them. I ultimately found out some of these students who were unresponsive don't even go to school here anymore, so that could be why. But for the non-responsive, we tried really hard to reach out to students and not close their case until we knew that they had been helped. But that does represent the people who didn't get in contact with us since mostly June. We're open for questions too.
Okay, are there any questions for our advocates? Senator Hansen?
Are there any cases that went unfavorably?
Yes. So I've had 2 academic appeals cases that went through, and the appeals were denied, so that would be unfavorable. And then I also had 3 students, separate from those 2, who were dissatisfied with every resource on campus that I referred them to, and ultimately their cases were closed with no solution, and they were not able to be helped. Though they did state that they had satisfaction with Donna and I, so.
Any other question? Chairperson Bobbitt?
You had stated that you had referred, I believe, 2 cases to referendum. Could you clarify what you mean by that?
Yeah, so essentially those 2 people just got, their appeal was denied, or in one case he couldn't appeal within the time. And so the only thing they can do is write a referendum to the Supreme Court. Neither student, to our knowledge, has made that decision. I'm getting a no from Leslie, has actually gone through with that, but they were given the referendum and told how they could essentially appeal the appeal.
Are there any questions? Senator Miller?
Has there been any idea about why they haven't gone through with those? And if possible, is it because of like the possible anxiety going to the Supreme Court, as I assume?
I'm not sure. I think in one case, I don't know if we can really speak to why they chose not to. In the other case, we did offer personally to like help them with the referendum, to attend things. So I think that that would, hopefully assuage anyone's worries of going, though I can imagine that would be difficult. That case is not closed yet, so I have not heard from that student, but they still have time to file a referendum, and I am still trying to support them in that process.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. We'll give you a light clap, everybody. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Are there any questions for Vice President Fawn? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move to 3.3, report from the Judicial Branch, Chief Justice Hernandez.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Hernandez, and I serve as Chief Justice, as Speaker Victoria introduced me. I know you guys have a long agenda, so I will try to keep it as brief as possible. So the Judicial Branch has only received one case so far in my session, and that was right before classes started, and that would have been 67-01. We received that case, and it was about the constitutionality of the fall Senate election, which we do have an opinion over that. So obviously that's already happened, but if you're interested in reading the specific opinion, that is out there. We were expecting some parking citation appeals, as the advocates mentioned, but they have not been received. And to kind of refer back to the question, so when they bring the appeal to us, it's usually through email, and there will not be a formal hearing unless it's like two parties involved and either one of them would want to speak, if that makes sense. So hopefully that shouldn't intimidate students. They are not necessarily facing the Supreme Court necessarily. And there's also only 7 of us, so hopefully that's not too intimidating. The court has met up a few times a semester to get prepared for when we receive cases, if and when. So we've run through the Constitution, bylaws, parking citations, and then the changes proposed to the judicial review process, just to make sure that we're up to date and making sure that we're prepared in case we receive a case, and especially if there's an emergency involved. So next week, the court is meeting with Stacia Bowden. She is the general counsel for the university. We will talk to her about her journey through law school and what she does for the university currently. Since most of the court hopes to attend law school, we thought there would be great benefits from speaking to her, and especially because it's a connection back to the university. So to update you all on the online court request form, I know that I brought that up when I was being appointed last year. I've had a few meetings with Kyle Wilson, who is the Director of Student Conduct and Community Standards, in order to put that form together. And Maxient has been thrown around already tonight. The form will be on that, so it's a Maxient form. Right now, the referendum is a form that you have to specifically request from us, and we acknowledge that that's not super accessible to students, and so we want to ease the process and help assuage any students who might fear coming to us, or maybe are turned away from the process because it's inaccessible. So that is in the process. He was out of town, and then I was out of town, so our next meeting will be in the next week, and we are going to get some trial runs going to make sure that the form is working. And then once that form is released, it should be up in the spring semester. I will make sure that you all know, so you guys can tell your constituents and make sure that they are aware of that change in our process. For now, please continue to direct students to the advocates. If it's obviously like a parking appeal, they have to go through that appeal first, and then if they don't agree with the decision, that's when the appeal would come to us. So continue to send them to them, or if it's like a request for interpretation, you guys can email me or our clerk, John Weens, to receive the form. I've also been working to design brochures and just more advertising to make sure students are aware of the services that the Judicial Branch provides. This session, we had one justice step away due to scheduling conflicts, but as you all saw on the agenda, Kylie will be presenting the appointment bill later today, so if that goes smoothly, we will once again have a full court, and I will work to get the onboarding going. So that is my report. I'm open for questions.
Are there any questions? Senator Knuckles?
Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning that your opinion can be read. Where exactly can we read that? I'm fully curious.
It's just, Gabe, help. I know how to access it because it's in my Word, but yes,
We'll drop it in the Teams channel for you to look at.
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll get better at that, y'all. Okay, 3.4, report from the Speaker of the Senate. So we just finished our first SGA mixer. Good going, guys. I hope you're all fed and you had a little soda as a treat. But that was with obviously the executive branch, our legislative branch, our agencies, and then some members of the Freshman Leadership Council. I don't presume this will be the final time we'll do an SGA mixer, and we'll do some more times to kind of get everyone together and do some more activities to make sure we're really fostering a community within this organization. But tonight, we have a lot on the agenda. So for the consent agenda, we obviously have our usual minutes, and then we have our appointing our new senators to the legislative committees, as well as 4 individual funding bills to consider. And then we have 1 bill receiving its second read. That would be the Leadership Succession Act, brought from Government Oversight with no recommendation to pass, which we'll talk about when we get into that. And then we have our new business. So we have, as Chief Justice Hernandez talked about, we have appointing our Associate Justice position. Then we have the Funding Procedure Act, the Legislative Council Amendment Act from Vice President Fawn, and then a ton of authorizations from the Special Projects and Capital Fund, which we'll discuss a little bit more about the nuances there when we get to that piece, especially for our new senators who aren't exactly sure what the Special Projects and Capital Fund is. We'll talk about that then. But Food for Fines is this week, the 4th through the 8th. So make sure to donate while we still have a little bit of time. And then pending, obviously, the executive order that was read today, we will have our funding task force meeting. Obviously, once all the agencies are brought, then we can meet and we can talk about appropriations, student fees, and all of those wonderful things that we really want to clear up. Yeah, any questions? Okay, good stuff. We'll move to 3.5, report from the Government Oversight Chairperson Bobbitt.
I'm going to go ahead and do my report from up here today. Got a lot to cover tonight, and I want to make sure that everyone is on the same page with that. The speaker had stated that the Leadership Succession Act was forwarded with no recommendation to pass. That wording, I personally feel implies the wrong association. It was submitted out of committee without recommendation, which means that the committee wanted the opinion of the full Senate. I feel like no recommendation to pass tells a different story. But the Leadership Succession Act was amended slightly from the previous version that was presented in the first read. Some language was removed, and the treasurer position was added back into the formal line of succession. I do know that the version in the Teams was a little bit hard to read, so we will be presenting it on the board during discussion. I would very strongly encourage participation on this act. I know I say it a lot, but these are important decisions, and the purpose of referring it back to the whole or Senate as a whole without recommendation was to gauge the opinions of U.S. senators and a more diverse body of people representing students that were not represented in the Government Oversight Committee. When we get to that point, I will explain kind of where everything stands and what the committee viewed favorably, what the committee wanted an opinion on. But this is a space that I would ask that everybody give it a good read between now and then and be prepared to debate on it. I know there the potential for some motions later on the night, I would just ask that we exercise full debate before we consider those. Yeah. And then tonight we will be doing the first read on the Funding Procedures Act. I do want to clarify that this act is geared at addressing some of the concerns with the different funding procedures, but it is by no means a final solution. It is independent of changes to appropriations or student fees and simply seeks to address how we consider these acts, not necessarily the substance of the process itself. So we're not making changes to how student fees or appropriations works within those systems, but instead we are simply changing how the Senate views them on the backside of things. Yeah.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. And thank you, Chairperson Bobbitt, for the clarification there. You all haven't seen yet a bill that has no recommendation when it's brought to the floor. It's a little bit different for us too, but that essentially means everyone within the committee had no recommendation. It's exactly as it sounds. If they all did not want it to pass, it would have failed their committee, but they wanted the opinion of the Senate itself. That's why it says no recommendation in that space. Does anyone have any questions about that piece before we move on? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to 3.6, report from Academic Affairs, Chairperson Grajeda.
Hello, my report's going to be from down here. Academic Affairs met today and passed AR-67-008, the Academic Advisor Feedback Act, with a 4-0-0 vote. And if you don't remember, that one's concerning the lack of adequate conditions for advisors to effectively serve students. And then just to share some of our current and upcoming initiatives, we have funding Blue Books through the Shocker Bookstore for students. We heard about that one last Senate during public forum, I believe. Increasing syllabus information to course descriptions, adding the SGA inquiry form to your MyWSU page, installing no smoking signage around campus. And if you're interested in collaborating for any of these, please reach out to me or any member of my committee. And lastly, Faculty Senate did not meet this week, so no report there. And I will sit for questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Student Services as well as Diversity, Empowerment, and Inclusion chairpersons are not here today, so we'll move directly to 3.9, report from the Central Office. Central Office, do you have a report?
Just a reminder to register for classes as they open next week. Hopefully you have already started thinking about that. And then next week we've been making some decisions on the Elections Commission for the upcoming year. And next week we will present the new Chief Elections Commissioner, who will talk a little bit about her plans for the elections in the spring semester. And other than that, that is all that I got.
Are there any questions for Gabe? Okay, seeing none, thank you. And I believe that's November 11th for most people, so register for classes. Now we move to section 4, public forum and presentations. Public forum provides a chance for individuals to have the privilege of speaking before the Senate. This is a time for the association to listen to what the community has to say, and to that we offer undivided respect and attention. I would like to remind everyone that although we allow the speakers the privilege to use this platform, the opinions of the speaker do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the association or the university. Katie Austin.
Good evening. My name is Katie Austin, and I serve as the Director of Housing and Residence Life. Each year, the Housing Department brings forward our rates as we take them to the Kansas Board of Regents. We bring them before 2 different student groups to get public comment and feedback, and so that is the process that we are doing tonight. We are bringing forward a proposal, and I believe we've handed out some sheets. I apologize if I don't have quite enough for everyone, but we're proposing a flat rate, so a 0% increase, no increase to any of the housing rates, and a 3% increase to the meal plan rates, which aligns with the increase that we receive from Chartwell's in our dining contract. So that is the plan. We'd like to keep the rates flat the years that we can, and that is possible at this point in time. So none of the room types in any of the 3 residence halls, flats, suites, or Shocker Hall, we are expecting 0 increases in any of those spaces. So I just wanted to open it up for questions or comments.
Are there any questions specifically about the housing rates form you're seeing in front of you? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we have Joshua Mallard.
First, I will apologize for any stuttering, get nervous and can't speak. But Wichita State University is an institution built on the betterment and education of not only students, but also the surrounding community. Wichita State is a public learning institution that also functions as a business. In some cases, the line of business or the line of public and business opportunities are blurred. One example of the blur is the very successful athletics program. Athletics serves students in the community in incredible ways. Recently, both students and the community have concerns that the university is leading with its business side to the detriment of its public side, the students. The beginning of this year, students saw the abolishment of essential Shocker Hall parking, a change that was said to benefit the student body and the community. This brought a lot of unrest for students and fellow senators. Coincidentally, my concerns are related to the men's basketball games, although not parking spots, which that were no longer available to students who pay to attend to the university and live in Shocker Hall. As an aside, and wanted to provide an update on the parking situation. Lot 1, again, is available to students. Lots 2W, 2N, 22, 26S are still remain reserved for, are still only for Shocker Hall are not for Shocker Hall. Not for Shocker Hall residents. And then lots 3S and 3N will soon are currently closed and I believe fully demolished for the construction. Back to my concerns. I'm not here to talk about the parking situation because, as we know, there's plenty of parking on campus. And like those in our community, we just don't like to walk. But that's what, the president likes to say. I'm here to talk about the situation within the athletic department regarding school spirit. And this week, we have a women's and men's basketball game. Well, many of you may not have heard about this, but there's a new premium ticket option that went into place this season as a way to increase revenue, which means, quote, relocating members of the school's spirit squad, end quote. These two quotes were read directly from the KWCH article, Wichita State Athletic Department issues a response after baseline seating plans to move the cheer and dance teams. Comments that I have received include half of the spirit squad, the cheer and dance team, have been moved to the first 2 rows of the student section to allow for premium seating, tables and chairs on the ends of the courts. Students already have a problem with very selfish members of the community showing up early and taking up the first few rows of the student spirit section, with the now cheer and dance teams being pushed away further from the main court session. Now, what is going to happen what is also going to happen is they're having a third-party concession group that will be doing concessions instead of the cheer and dance teams. In the past, the cheer and dance teams have done concessions to raise money for their competitions to nationals, but now they will not be able to do this. And concerns that have been brought up by not just faculty and staff, but also alumni, are if the third-party concessions are too busy, then the folks of the Spirit Squad might have to make deliveries on their behalf. It is degrading to the Spirit Squad to have to deliver food to the people who have paid premium after being kicked out of the court. Again, statements from faculty as well as alumni. Now, Saul of the athletics department did speak out and state, and this was posted in the KWCH, so if you want this quote, it is in there. So, quote, the dialogue pertaining to athletics requesting cheer and dance, I'm going to restart. The dialogue pertaining to athletics requesting cheer/dance deliver food to these premium seats holders has either been miscommunicated and or misinterpreted. For many years, the cheer/dance team, along with many other campus and community nonprofit groups, have been compensated by the contracted concierge to work concession stands and be compensated for it on the main concourse at Coke Arena as additional fundraising opportunities to support national competitions, examples, travel and lodging, etc. This year, athletics has paid for a third-party personnel, not the cheer and dance team, to serve as primary wait staff runners for seasonal ticket holders in the premium seats. Now, if you listen to the statement that he provided, he did not say that the cheer and dance team will not not be serving people. He just says that they have done it in the past. He said that it is miscommunicated or misinterpreted. That is just to push away the statement of, are they actually going to do that? And as well, he said that they've just been compensated. Again, that's not saying that they're not going to do it. Another big problem with this is, why are you trying to get more money with premium seating and not increasing marketing to fill the already vacant seats? We have not had a full house for a while within the athletic departments at basketball games, from what I remember, and I don't even remember when the last time it was. But the athletics department should be working towards filling seats, then enticing them with premium options to ensure that more people show up, and not having empty seats with the potential of empty premium seats, but still moving the cheer team. More quotes from alumni include cheerleaders. Quote, cheerleaders and dancers are a part of the whole game experience and should be on the floor to promote school spirit and encourage the fans to cheer the team on. I also agree that the safety for all is in jeopardy, having chairs and fans so close to the players, end quote. Several more comments from alumni and staff have included, if we're going to have these chairs and seating so like on the courts, that is going to cause safety concerns for not only the staff but also the people, but also the fans. If someone gets hurt, who is liable? So several members of the dance team have gone to social media to post, if you'd like, quote, if you'd like to donate to the dance team, select a program, then athletics as the division and WC dance team as the fund, end quote, as they need the money now that the athletics department has basically shoved them away even further. Continuing with the dance team, they have prepared dances for a very long time on the courts, and how are they supposed to fully support the student body through its endeavors in the already crowded stands? Yes, they are able to go down into the courts, but that takes up valuable time that they could be immediately dancing and cheering on the student section. And not just with the cheer and dance team, but now alumni have started to come forward and also complain about the athletics department not providing enough support even for the band that is playing. There are hundreds of comments from alumni on the Shocker Faithful page on Facebook, with large amounts of backlash towards the new decision with the athletics department. Now, we do see that the athletics department cares about education and the college process of its players, but not the full experience of the other players that are involved. What makes a game a game? Well, the cheer and dance teams, the band, the student section, and the family that the students bring along to play with them. They are what makes a game a game. Until the athletics department can fully support not just its athletes, but the whole of the university and not put business first, then we will have succeeded. It's the same as being an LAS senator for me. I represent everyone, not just LA senators. And the athletics department is for the athletics people, but also the whole university. Now, on a slightly completely different note, but still let's talk about athletics department. As many of you know, we are currently working on passing a funding bill for the pickleball courts. Well, as you know, they were demolished to make way for the softball courts, which I think is essential for the growth of the softball team. For many of you who do not know, we have a very, very successful softball team, and we do need this. The real question is, what does the student body need? Well, we did want the pickleball courts originally, and Campus Rec decided, hey, let's fix up the basketball courts and put them there. Well, when they finally spent a massive sum of money and they were contacted by the athletics department, told, y'all messed up because that's where our new building is going to go. Well, why didn't they tell them that when we were building the new courts? Well, guess what? Here we are. And now the athletics department wants us to fund the creation of the pickleball courts that they just demolished. No, we should be using that money for the student body in a more financially stable and useful manner, not destroying and rebuilding something we had, but to build something new, be it a building, a site, a program, a scholarship, or anything. The $137,000 that is going to the courts has no reason to be funded by the whole of the student body if we're not the ones that tore them down. Thank you.
Got right in the time. Yeah. Good job. Okay, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Is there, oh, yeah. Okay, good job. We're really killing it. We're getting better at the claps. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public forum? Director Nguyen.
this. Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. So if y'all don't know me, I also serve as president of the Ambassadors for Diversity and Inclusion. And this week is Diversity Week, and so there's a bunch of fun events and freebies this week, free food, and also a lot of our agencies are participating members as well. So I just wanted to give a quick reminder to come out and support and participate in Diversity Week this week. That's all. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during public forum? Senator Murphy, or Patrick Murphy, whichever way you're presenting.
So I'd like to let everyone know that the home opener for men's basketball and women's basketball is going to be this Saturday. Women's basketball is going to be playing against Belmont at 2 p.m. And then men's basketball is going to be playing at 6 p.m. against Montana State. As Senator Mallard pointed out, it's incredibly important for us to foster a strong student section and a strong fan environment. And the only way to do that is to show up to games. Each game takes like maybe an hour and 45 minutes. Student tickets are free. You can pick them up at the Coke ticket office, at most of the residential buildings, at the RC, thank you, as well as Heskett, a bunch of places on campus. Again, totally free with your Shocker ID. So yeah, show out to games. We'd love to see you there.
Yes. Delightful. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during this time? Senator Lewis?
Okay, so recently we had an election, and so I am a transgender student, and every transgender student, or all the transgender students that you represent, are terrified. The government for next year will be mostly composed of people who are extremely against LGBTQ plus rights, and in many ways, and that's dangerous for us, and the political and social climate will be increasingly violent towards us. So just check in with your constituents, please. Be aware of what they face, and please try to protect them.
Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to speak during public forum? Senator Locke?
Hi everyone, I just wanted to come up here and say that now that the election season is over, Shockers Vote is going to be holding applications for our delegate board for next year. So if you're interested in applying and helping foster civic engagement on campus, I'll be dropping the link to that application in our GroupMe, and also it'll be available on our Shockers Vote Instagram in just a couple days, and that will be open up until December 2nd. So apply if you're interested.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during public forum? Senator Miller?
Hello, everybody. As we all know, election has ended, and to a lot of people, it is scary. And that's something we just have to come and understand. The truth is, I am also an LGBTQ student and senator. I am non-binary and pansexual, and I've had my fair share of gender dysphoria that has had me consider possibly transitioning before. This is entering into a very scary time for a lot of LGBTQ people. But regardless of that happening, I want to tell everybody here to fight. Regardless of anything that does happen that can possibly take away anybody's rights, regardless of how one side or another acts, I think it's very important that we fight for humanity, fight for love, and fight for the change that we want to see in the world. In turn, I believe it is best done through open dialogue, one that does not spread hate, one that actually goes about and try to understand one another. On November 18th, the Political Science Department will be holding a Pizza and Politics. This will happen, I believe, at, if I have the time correctly, at 12:30 on Monday, November 18th. And I invite you all to come and listen. You'll hear a lot of different opinions. You'll hear a lot of different thoughts and feelings. But in reality, I want you to understand how some people, understand how me, LGBTQ person, how we feel in our shoes, how women feel in their shoes. So regardless of your political opinion or who you voted for, I want us to come together and talk. And that's why I invite you all to Pizza and Politics on November 18th in the Lindquist Political Science Department at Lindquist room 417, so up on the 4th floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public forum. Let me get back to my little section here, and we'll move to section 5, approval of the consent agenda. So like I talked about earlier, we have our minutes, we have our committee assignments, as well as some individual funding that we've traditionally put on the consent agenda. So are there any objections to approving the consent agenda as such? Okay, seeing none, it's approved. That means all of our senators, congrats, you have committees where you can actually, start your stuff. Good stuff. Now we move to section 6, consideration of pending business, 6.1.
Act on request to approve SB-67-105 Leadership Succession Act.
Is the author here who would like to speak? You have the floor.
One moment, please, while we provide a more accessible version for you. Okay. As I stated earlier in my report, the Government Oversight Committee did meet and discuss the Leadership Succession Act in great detail, with some amendments being offered and some different sections, but ultimately the committee felt that given our limited representation, it was better to forward some of the bigger questions to the Senate as a whole. And I will kind of go over the bill real quick to let you know which sections were agreeable, which sections we felt had some, or we were requesting some additional input on. And then to wrap it all up, I will let you guys know kind of where at least I would recommend starting discussion on the bill. Okay. So starting first, it's really hard to see there, but we added back in the treasurer into the formal line of succession. And the concern was that the amended version, excluding the treasurer, left the line of succession too short. This is the need to use the line of succession is not something that's a faraway possibility. A few years ago, the Student Government Association had a leadership crisis where we ran through just about the entire line of succession as it currently sits, and it called into question who would lead government if everybody in the cabinet says no. And it put the university in a really tricky position. And then more recently than that, we have had extreme changes in leadership in a relatively short amount of time. So as we consider succession, it is very important to remember that this is not an abstract concept. Within the past couple years, we have tested the bounds of our leadership and what to do when leadership is unable or unwilling to rise to the occasion. So the area that the committee ran into the issue of not feeling comfortable providing an opinion on was Section 2, exhaustion of the line of succession for the office of the president. What the current language of the bill calls for is the Senate to hold a limited election, whereas the Senate leadership and the cabinet would have the ability to run for the position of president. Instead of kicking it to the entire student body, it provides an opportunity for our most qualified members of student government to come forward and state their case as to why they should lead student government through the time of transition. The specifics of the election follow the election criteria established for the Speaker of the Senate, and it just provides an opportunity for whoever is interested in running for the position of Speaker to have to justify how and why they are the best candidate to serve as the President. Under the current system, it just runs straight down the cabinet directors for who takes over the position of president should something happen to the person above them on the list. And while that system is its own unique way, the order in which directors are assigned is arbitrary at best and does not reflect the reality that unfortunately, not all of our cabinet positions potentially are the best person to take over as student body president. The requirements for any individual person in the line of succession are very different from the requirements to run and operate the student body. So I believe that as we look to someone to take over as the leader of SGA, we should look for the best candidate, not the person who is next on the list. Then, or keep going. Okay, and then this section here is kind of, it's implied, but essentially it says if all of the chair people decide that they do not want to take over as Speaker of the Senate, should the line of succession be exhausted, it triggers an emergency election where a new Speaker of the Senate is chosen in accordance to the procedures outlined. So once we go through our 4 chair people, essentially we would just re-elect a new Speaker as if we were holding the Speaker election for the first time. And then Section 5 here is, once again, it's implied, but it just states what happens if the Senate decides not to promote a pro temp to a full chairperson. Under the regulations, it is up to the Senate to decide whether or not a pro temp who becomes an acting chairperson, if a chair steps down, gets to move into the position permanently. And this just says that if for whatever reason the Senate decides that the pro temp is not a good fit to be a chairperson, they will be an acting chairperson until the Speaker can appoint a new chairperson. Going back up to the section for the president. The question and the point of debate that I would really like us to start with and focus on is, does the Senate feel comfortable being the body that selects the president? Some of the other options that were presented in committee were potentially sending it to an election of the full student body, or allowing the treasurer to serve in a temporary capacity until we can go through the process of selecting a new president. The point of concern that I raised on that issue was our election procedures are quite lengthy. So if we did kick it to a formal election, government would have to operate and continue on for weeks at a time until we go through the full process of appointing a new president the traditional way. Yeah, but like I said, that's where I would like debate to start. I can't force you guys to do that, but yeah. And then I'll open myself to questions.
Are there any questions? Now this is its second read, so if you're confused about the document or anything pertaining to the passage of this, please ask now. Or forever hold your peace. Okay, Senator Knuckles.
So, okay, so if I'm reading section 2 correctly, which I think I am, so we would hold a limited election just from the Senate, right? To elect a president.
It would be from Senate leadership and the cabinet.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Going once. Senator Lewis.
I'm sorry, I think you may have made it clear already, but did you mention that your committee thought about having a temporary appointment before a full student body election?
Yes. Under the current language, the treasurer of the treasurer would take over as interim president until a new president could be appointed. The question becomes, how long should that 10-year last? Under the current system, the treasurer would serve in an interim capacity strictly until the Senate could meet to vote on a new president. Whereas if we did switch to a full election, potentially the treasurer or whoever we designate would be student body president for a couple weeks until we can organize and have an election. Then I do want to clarify one section. In the sake of equality, since we don't provide our cabinet members the ability to vote in the election, if Senate leadership did declare candidacy, they would be ineligible to vote. Under the ethics policy, basically you're not allowed to vote on anything that would further yourself. So just for the sake of equality, all of the people who would be running for student body president would reserve the same rights.
Any other questions? Senator Island?
Under Section 2, can you clarify the role of the Chief Justice when it comes to election procedures?
The Chief Justice would preside as the chief officer, similar to how Vice President Vaughn leads the election for the speaker at the start of the session. They are just an unbiased party who has no stake in the game and could facilitate the process in a manner that is like fair and equal to all candidates running.
Any other questions? Senator Barnes?
I like to play devil's advocate sometimes. What would be a reason to not implement this and to not consider this?
I think there are some good reasons to leave it as it is, particularly because making drastic changes lead to potentially unforeseen consequences. Like I said, this is not outside of the realm of possibility, and potentially by introducing more complexity to the system, you do run the risk of running into something that cannot be foreseen. That's not saying that the current process is the best or anything about that. It's just Under the current process, we know that if something happens to the first 5 people online, we know exactly who's in charge next.
I have a question. More of clarifying for the body's sake, also mine. So say the president is no longer able to fulfill their duties, obviously it would go to the vice president and then the speaker, and then following that, the treasurer. I know you stated earlier something about interim, but I don't want that to trip anyone up. So as the bill states now, the treasurer is in the line of succession, not as interim, but would then presume the office of the presidency.
Yes, so if the treasurer is on the formal line of succession, where that interim status comes into effect is if the treasurer decides they do not wish to retain the office permanently. What was brought up when making this discussion is it takes time to do whatever we're going to do, and we need someone to keep the lights on while we're doing that. There are decisions and actions that the student body president performs that cannot not happen. We need somebody who has the ability to speak on and act on behalf of the association. So allowing that interim position just provides us somebody to run government while we're trying to figure out who should do it permanently.
I have a follow-up. For the treasurer as it sits, that interim status, is that explicitly stated within the resolution that in the event that they would not like to proceed with the presidency, that they then immediately fill that interim status? Or is that more of like a catch-all idea from government oversight that was like, this could happen? Or is it like,
go ahead.
sorry, or is it like implicitly implied that they would until obviously the next line, which is the Senate leadership and the cabinet begin their voting procedure?
It is explicitly stated in the bill that the treasurer becomes the interim president. I believe it's at the very end, but don't quote me on that, within this section.
Okay, are there any other questions? Senator Knuckles.
Okay, so I have another clarification question. So far, we've just been discussing what happens if the president is unable to perform his or her duties. How does the line of succession, this might be a stupid question, how does the line of succession look for, like, if something were to happen to Vice President Fawn? Would Speaker Owens then become Vice President?
No. So if Vice President Fawn steps down, but Kylie's still president, Kylie gets to pick a new VP. If Kylie and Vice President Fawn step down, then Speaker Owens would be the president, and she would have the ability to pick her own cabinet. And so essentially, you have the ability to backfill. You just can't fill the if the position above you is vacated, then it starts that chain of events.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll ask one just for clarifying and discussion that we had in government oversight about interim senators and how establishing that interim senator position last session will impact the potential vote for the line of succession.
Okay. The Speaker Owens did ask the question in committee, should we allow our interim senators to rise to the level of speaker and potentially beyond that while they are serving in their interim capacity. And the decision of the Government Oversight Committee was our interim senators or senators. If the Senate wants to appoint a speaker that is interim in nature and could potentially lose their seat in the election, that is the Senate's prerogative. Hopefully whoever we appoint wouldn't lose their seats. And it's incredibly hard not to be retained in the election. But the position of the committee was that any individual senator can rise to the level of speaker. So if the Senate feels most confident with someone who is an interim senator, then that is the Senate's prerogative.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, Senator Izzard.
This might be another interesting question, but say like Speaker Owens or whatsoever had to end up like both President Hauer and Vice President Fawn stepped down and Speaker Owens had to step in as the president. You had mentioned that she has the ability to like make her own cabinet or whatsoever. So does that mean that the other ones, the other positions that are currently in the cabinet are not protected, like they can be overthrown basically, or do they get protected?
So all of our cabinet positions and chair people positions, with the exception of the advocates, serve at the discretion of the president and the speaker. If Kylie woke up tomorrow and decided she didn't like her cabinet, she could remove all of them. I thought the advocates did not serve at the pleasure.
So with the exception of the treasurer and the advocates, everyone else on cabinet serves at the pleasure of the president. All 4 chairs serve at the pleasure of the speaker. So if a new president came in, which has happened before, they have the ability to dismiss the entire cabinet and pick new cabinet members. And that's not because they may not be good or whatever, but every new president has the ability to just select the people that they want to serve and lead in their leadership team, the ability that the speaker has, and the same ability that the chief justice has in selection of the clerk of the court as well.
Okay, and then just to add on that, let's say Speaker Owens did become president of the association, then that would trigger the line of succession for the speakership, which is outlined here. The government oversight chairperson would become the Speaker of the Senate, subject to a vote of the Senate. So the Senate ultimately gets to decide whether or not the line of succession is enacted. But let's say for whatever reason I couldn't do it, then AJ would become the Speaker of the Senate, and our pro temps would backfill to fill our positions.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. So let me get back to my little agenda piece. Great, wonderful stuff. Okay, now that we've had our second read, we move into the debate period. This is a discussion item where we talk about what we like, what we don't like about this resolution, how we urge other people to vote, or even members of the Government Oversight Committee can explain why there was no recommendation and their thought process as this goes. But I just wanted to say that before we get into the voting procedure, especially that we have a lot of our new senators who we haven't necessarily passed a bill at this level yet with all of you. So are there any questions about the debate period before we get into the actual debate period? Okay, seeing none. Okay, now we're in the debate period. Is there anyone who'd like to speak for or against this? Okay, Senator Murphy.
So, as Chairperson Bobbitt mentioned, there was a good amount of disagreement on Section 2. I am a big part of that disagreement. I personally do not feel comfortable voting. That was embarrassing. I don't feel comfortable voting for the president because, from my perspective, it is the legislative body voting for the head of a completely different branch of government. I have proposed other options. Yeah. Okay. I've proposed other options. I personally think that it would be better for us to vote on like an interim president, and then have a full election for students. But I think it would be best if we could I want to get like the whole of the Senate's opinion on it first, because only 4 people deciding something this big, no. But I kind of want to gauge the feedback from everyone else, but I wanted to put that out there. I personally don't think that us as senators should be voting for a permanent position such as president.
I'm gonna go Senator Mallard and then back over here and then back over here.
Yeah, so this is something that kind of happened, I think it was like 2 years ago, roughly. I believe it was with the vice president. And a comment that was brought up was that we as the body, so it was the same thing, that the student bodies should be the ones to vote for them because that is what it was originally. And I agree with that. But another comment that was also made was that we were elected to represent the student body, so we should have the best interests of the student body in hand. And with that, we as the student government should also be able to select someone that we deem that would represent everyone. And I think that there's goods and bads to both sides. I'm going to be brutally honest. I'm going to probably vote in abstention just because I do think that it would be better to have more votes and more of the student body in there. But as we are picked by them, granted, there's probably some people don't have as many votes, and that's another problem that a lot of people have. But when you're in Senate, you actually start to talk to people. So you actually start to represent them more than just those initial votes. You might have only gotten, let's say, 10 votes, but you've talked to hopefully over 100 people now. So you represent those 100 people, and with that, you'll be able to pick the right person. I think that something that was mentioned as well by Chairperson Bobbitt was that if we do the official process, it's going to take a lot longer, and having a governing body without someone to represent them and to properly move them on is going to be a more detrimental, in my opinion, than having someone immediately that we were elected by the body, so we speak for the body. Thank you.
Anyone else? Vice President Fawn?
Yeah, so it's my belief that the Senate should have the ability to elect a president in this scenario. If we go through the student body president, vice president, and speaker, and if the treasurer does not wish to retain the permanent position of student body president, I think it should be up to the Senate to decide on who's to be the next student body president, only because in that situation, I think that would be a dire time, but also the Senate did have the power to elect a vice president 2 years ago, and they did do so. And if the Senate feels like the candidates aren't good candidates, then they can always reject them, and they did so 2 years ago. And the concern that some senators and some students I talked to had about not being fully representative of the student body. It's my view that senators do represent the student body, and it's their responsibility to talk to students, reach out to students about concerns. And when it comes down to a presidential election, I think that it should be up to the Senate to decide who it would be among the cabinet and Senate leadership. So that's just my view, and then I'm sure President Howard has agreed with me in those conversations before. We like how this bill is oriented after going to government oversight and proposing some changes. So I'm speaking in affirmation of this bill. So.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during this time? Chairperson Bobbitt?
I think one of the important considerations to make when looking at what action we should take is that the position of president is incredibly complex. It is not something that you can just drop into and immediately know what you're going to do. I'll be brutally honest, if I was called upon to serve as president of the association, I would not have the unique qualifications to immediately run the position from day one. It would be an incredible learning curve, and while my leadership experience and time in the Senate in these meeting spaces as a chairperson has provided me greater insight into the process and some of the complexities of the situation, there's still an incredible amount of stuff that Kylie does that is beyond my capacity. So to take a random student or a student who wins popular support and ask them to run government day one, even with all the safeguards and support, such as the central office, if the cabinet's retained, if we retain other members of leadership, it is still an incredible ask of any one student. So that's why I specifically targeted leadership, because they are familiar with the process, they are familiar with the people in these spaces, and while they may not know everything, their gap of knowledge is significantly less than any individual student across this campus.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during this time? Senator Miller?
To start, point of information, can this bill be sent back to committee?
Good question. Yes, you do have to make a motion to do so, to return it back to committee. That's up to you. You do have to get a second, and then it does have to pass with a majority. But ultimately, if you decide to do that, that's great. But I would urge all of us to have a little bit more of discussion before we decide that, as I would love to hear more opinions and thoughts about this. And additionally, so I presume some people are thinking about amendments and those kinds of things to alter that. And usually that's typically reserved for when things need a pretty big overhaul or change. Regardless of if there is no recommendation from the committee itself, that doesn't mean they don't want it to be passed or brought forth. They just want more opinions and thoughts. And so if it ends up getting failed, then it does. If it doesn't, then yeah. Does that answer a piece of your question?
Yes, it does. Secondly, I do believe, like, when it comes to the interim president situation, I believe it should, the reason why I think it should be sent back to committee is that when we have an interim president, I don't believe that we should have it for upwards of 6 to 8 weeks, that we could possibly have it for, have an interim president. And that's why I believe it needs to be in law, that it's expedited trying to get a new president. I think at max 2 weeks. I know it might be difficult for the election commission to do that, but I truly believe if we are to represent the people, I believe we should also at the same time let the people have a voice instead of just us speaking for them. I think it's very important that we give them the choice and not immediately elect a president-elect and then have it for weeks on end.
Thank you for your perspective. I will say on the terms of elections, that currently doesn't sit within this resolution, so I hinder us from discussing something that doesn't exist on the resolution we're currently debating. If you want to include that, that's fantastic. I urge you to do an amendment. But on this, the special election piece, which would be required to conduct an election of the student body. There are bylaws that we have to follow and certain times and dates that are necessary to follow in order to stay in compliance with our bylaws. And that's another discussion we can get into a little bit more. So it's not really a discussion of we want it to be 1 week or 2 weeks. That's not our decision. It is within our bylaws that we do have to follow. So if we decide that that's something that this body would like to do and change, within this resolution, then we can begin to discuss that, but I'd like to get a little bit more opinions and thoughts. So, anyone else like to? Senator Murphy.
I would like to respond to Chairperson Bobbitt's claim that he wouldn't feel like that he has the necessary qualifications. I'm sure you're great, bro. I'm sure you're great. If you're concerned that you wouldn't have the necessary qualifications as government oversight chair to serve out the full, however long it may be, depends on when the vacancy happens, what makes it equally, what makes the other positions also qualified if you're not?
And senators, I remind everyone to not converse with each other in the body. I appreciate your attempt to, talk about, and I love that. I think that's fantastic. But traditionally, we do talk forward as if we're talking to the camera and thus the student body. But thank you so much.
I wasn't sure how to phrase
that.
That's
okay. That's okay. And I appreciate it. Chairperson Bobbitt.
I think to respond to the question, like I said, it's not that I don't think I could do the position or that someone in my position couldn't do the position. I'm just saying that it would be an incredible ask to get up to speed, and it would require significant support from the central office, from other individuals in the process. And everyone in the cabinet is there for a reason. We all have unique abilities. We all have unique skill sets that propelled us to the position we sit. All of the chair people were chosen to head up their committees for a reason. And I'm not saying that an individual within those positions can't do the job. I'm just saying that there is an additional skill set that is hard to come by without having time served in the position. And for that reason, my preference would be someone who is at least familiar with the space compared to someone who would be learning the rules, the procedures, the bylaws, all of that completely from scratch.
I think I'll speak really quick on the bill itself. I'm definitely in favor of this bill. I think it's very eloquently made, and I very much appreciate their perspective. Additionally, I think some aspects that we need to be discussing with this as well is that this can happen literally any time throughout the year. At the end, with 2 months left, and it's just an interesting perspective when you think about potentially doing an election of the student body, a special election that does require time. And sometimes you don't have that. And if you still want to chance it, that's okay. I love it. Bring it as an amendment. That's fantastic. But in my 4 years here, we have had an event, a very scary one 2 years ago. It was just very ominous, a destabilization of power where obviously one of our presidents resigned, and then our vice president took the position and then resigned, and then all of their cabinet was then defunct because they no longer were serving at the pleasure of the president because their cabinet was gone, everything was cleared out, and then our speaker at the time fulfilled the position of the president of our institution, and then the Senate approved the vice president pick that they had. And as much as it is very tough, and it was previously addressed that it is tough to step in that position, I am definitely of the opinion myself that anyone sitting in here would have an insight here that a lot of other students don't have, and that they take the entire summer to learn. Within my position, and I'm sure within Cabinet's position as well, there's a reason why we take 3 months of the summer to learn about what student government is, what it does, how it functions, how to serve in this capacity. And in doing so, I have full faith in the Cabinet's ability and Senate leadership's ability to then serve in that position. And as much as it would be a jump to go from, one Senate leadership position to, president of the institution, it's less of a jump to me than a regular student to president. Although, once again, I am more than in favor of that if this is what this body decides, but I think Chairperson Bobbitt and the Government Oversight Committee have done a fantastic job in presenting this to us, and I think it is really a good idea to have the treasurer serve as an interim position within this resolution in the event that they don't want to serve. Because obviously the treasurer isn't really looking at the president's position in that way when they are like, I would like to be the treasurer. So that being the case, and then I think it's a very unique solution to have us, do an election within the Senate leadership and our leadership positions in cabinet. And I'm fascinated by that idea, and I think it's a good one. And I think if we bring it back to the Senate for the speaker election, and we just have it as we normally do, I'm definitely in favor of that as well. And I think I'd love to see more perspective on some more of these other pieces, especially from some people who haven't spoken yet. So, okay, Senator Pizzini.
I have a question. Being that you have the history that it's happened before, how was that event communicated to the general student body at that time? And was there any, I don't know, I guess, did they have any opinions on how this should be handled?
That's a good question. I think from my position within Senate it was a little bit different, as I had a little bit more insight on why those things may have happened or knew a little bit earlier than the general public. And I'm sure the Sunflower did a fantastic job as well of making sure that they were informing the public. But it was definitely a weird and also uncomfortable time because it was like, what is happening? Although it did happen at a very unique time of the beginning of the year where it was enough time to restabilize that section there. But I'm sure Gabe can give us a little bit more insight of what that looked like from his perspective as well.
Yeah, so the most recent one that kind of led to the third person having to step in, President resigned on the first day of classes. We announced it to the public shortly after that. Within a couple hours, the vice president was sworn in as president. He then resigned a week later before getting to appoint a vice president, and that transitioned then into the speaker having to step into the role as president shortly after that as well. The way that I think the way that the process worked, even how we announced it, the minute we knew, we alerted the student body so that they were aware, alerted leadership and Senate so that they were aware, and then we began our process of installing the new president so that the process can continue. There was a moment where when the vice president became president, he then started the process of selecting the new vice president, but resigned before he made the formal appointment. And then that kind of then triggered the rest of the process to occur from there.
Does that answer your question? Okay, yes, no? Okay. Okay, go ahead. Senator Pizzini?
Okay, so that sounds horrible. I, as a student, not being in the Senate, would feel very unsure if something like that was to happen. And getting back to Chairperson Bobbitt's bill and his explanation about having someone who is seasoned and experienced and knows the ways around the Senate is wonderful. But as a student, I would be very nervous, thinking that the perception would be that everyone else in this person's cabinet has the same habits of taking a position and then leaving the position. So that's my only thing about this, that the president and vice president, it's a big election. They're both elected by the student body. For us or for the leadership positions to have the ability to replace them internally would be a little bit disconcerting. It's like, it feels like something's being done undercover. It just doesn't feel transparent to me, and that's one problem that I have, and probably why I wouldn't agree with this resolution.
Senator Henley?
So I'm sure all of us are here for the same reason, to speak for the students and stuff. But I think in a time where students lose a lot of their power in the span of big government and the school making decisions and stuff, that it is important to make sure that they do get say in things that they're allowed to get say in. However, on the same end, Senator Bobbitt makes a really great point about it being a hard transition. So an idea of splitting it down the middle would be if we, as a Senate, pick 2 or 3 people that we think would be good options for it, and then giving it to the public, the student body, and saying, hey, we interviewed them, and these are our reasons behind picking them. This is why they would be good presidents, but we want you to decide. That way they see us as taking leadership during a time of uncertainty, and also giving them their voice and saying, hey, we know this is scary for you too, and we want you to be making a decision on this.
Senator Pang?
Hi, so I will be speaking in affirmation of this bill as someone who was a senator during that said scary time of our president and vice president stepping down, the whole cabinet situation. I hear a lot of your opinions about how students should get their say in this and choosing their president for their student body. We talk to our constituents every day. If you do not talk to a new student every day within your constituency, what are you doing as a senator? We are here to represent students, saying that if, God forbid, if this ever has happened again, talk to your constituents, get their ideas about it, get their thoughts, and make sure you ask their questions within this body, because we are here to do exactly that. So,
would anyone else like to discuss this? Senator Lewis.
Point of clarification, this is the time to make an amendment if we want to make an amendment, right?
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Lewis, do you have an amendment to propose?
My laptop is dead, so
Okay.
I would have a bit of trouble doing that.
Okay. Anyone else who'd like to discuss or, okay, Chairperson Bobbitt.
Can we do the senator a favor and display it on the big screen, please?
Yes. Senator Murphy.
Okay, wasn't sure if I needed to wait. Point of information, kind of going back to Senator Miller's question about redirecting it to committee. How would something like that be proposed? Like the specific wording or anything like that?
Good question. I'm going to direct that to Advisor Fonseca because I'm almost certain it's just a motion to resend the resolution back to committee, but I don't know the specific vote count needed, so.
Senator would just make a motion, it'd be seconded, and then you would just get a simple majority to send it back to the committee. Either you got to specify which one you want to send it back to.
So the verbiage would be as follows. I move to send resolution, insert name, back to the whatever committee you would like to send it back to, presumably government oversight, to be reviewed and voted on again. And then I would ask if there's any seconds, and pending a second, then we'd move into a voting procedure. Does that make sense to everybody? I know we haven't done this before, so if anyone has questions or thoughts. Chairperson Bobbitt?
Just personal favor to me and my committee. Is it possible to take a straw poll before we move in or entertain a motion to recommit on what the will of the body is? Because I personally don't feel like we've reached that consensus.
Good question. So here's what we can do, team. We can bring this back to committee of the whole, which would be our informal session in order to do the informal hand votes like we normally do, or for all of our new senators, it's that session that we just sit here, we get to call each other by a first name and say, I would like to do this, I would not like to do this. We get to be less formal with the process, and that way usually it streamlines the process of getting resolutions done, because we can throw away that kind of formal procedure of can't talk to this person, yada yada, you understand. But to bring us to committee of the whole, you have to move to do so, Chairperson Bobbitt, and I need a second, and I need for us to vote to do so. Chairperson Bobbitt.
I have a secondary question. For the sake of time and the other items on the agenda, would it be possible to refer this or to committee of the whole at next week's meeting?
Yep, you just got to do it.
Okay.
So whenever you say, I'd like to refer it to committee blank, give me committee of the whole and tell me the date, and that's more than appropriate. Are there any motions or speeches? Chairperson Bobbitt.
Okay, then I will move to recommit SB 67, whatever, 105 to committee at the whole on the 13th of November.
Is there a second? Okay, seeing multiple seconds, we move into our voting procedure, and our clerk will give you a little explanation about what that procedure looks like, since we haven't yet done a clicker vote for our new senators.
Okay, so basically what I'm going to have you do is turn on your clickers, and I'm going to have you double tap A. Do not press any other buttons, but double tapping A, please, for my sanity.
Speaker Owens, I have a point of order.
Yes, Senator Williams.
Motion to recommit's debatable.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So what that means, the point of order will clarify my decision to move on, that now it is a debatable motion. So we move into debate period on whether or not we would like to commit this resolution to committee of the whole next week. Is there anyone who'd like to speak during this time? Senator Murphy?
So it's clear that we've all got a good amount of opinions on this. Considering the amount of work still left on the agenda, I think our time would be better spent working on this and just continuing to formulate our opinions and talking about it next week.
Is there anyone against this motion who would like to speak? Okay. Vice President Fawn?
I'm speaking in negation because I think a lot of conversations we had about amendments, I think we need to either propose amendments and vote on them and decide on them and move on, or I think we should fail the bill as it is if we disagree with it. So I think I'm speaking in negation of it.
Thank you. So just to clarify, I am ending the debate period here simply because we are really running out of time, people, for the amount of things that we have still on our agenda. And I know we have a lot of discussion on some of those items. So now we have someone in favor and someone against who have spoken. I hope that gives you a little bit of feedback on where your other people are here. So we'll move into the voting procedure.
Okay, so the A button on your clicker is a yes, the B button is a no, and the C button is an abstain. As long as you have already done that double click of A, go ahead and click now, your vote.
Reminder, we're voting to recommit this to Committee of the Whole next week, November 13th, for an informal discussion about the resolution.
I'm not getting any votes, so I'm going to restart the program, and we're going to evaluate that. Okay. Okay, everyone double click A. Okay. And now vote. I'm still getting nothing.
Can we just go ahead and move into a roll call vote?
So that means we'll proceed to a roll call vote. Yay! Give our clerk a second to pull up all your names, and then we'll do that. And we'll try to be quick, even though we have a lot of things on the item. So just take a second, take a deep breath, maybe don't get a drink of water. We don't have time for that. So. We're going to do a hand vote. So we'll still have something for people to abstain as well. Clerk Carter? So what this means is if you're in favor, I'll say, are you in favor? You'll raise your hand. The same for those against and those abstaining. Do we get it? Give me a thumbs up. Stunning. Good stuff. Okay. All those in favor of reverting this back to Committee of the Whole November 13th, please raise your hand. And raise them high so I can count. Help me count. I'll do the... All those against? Okay. Okay, all those abstaining? Okay. With a clear majority, that passes. That will now revert back to Committee of the Whole November 13th during our session at 6:30 p.m. So we'll talk a little bit then about what that means and what that will look like. But for now, we will move on to Section 7, Consideration of New Business. 7.1. Act of request to approve SB-67-128, appointing Margaret Hundley to the position of Associate Justice. Is the author here and would like to speak? You have the floor.
Hello and good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to say I love the discussion so far. Snaps for everyone for sharing your opinions. That's so slay. I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold, it's been a week. But I'm here to ask that you all confirm Margaret Hundley to the position of Associate Justice this evening. Maggie is a second-year junior. She's majoring in political science. I have gotten to know her throughout this semester because we actually have 2 political science classes together. And throughout my time of getting to know Maggie, I have come to notice that she has excellent communication skills. She isn't afraid to speak her mind, and she pays great attention to detail. These are all qualities that I think are essential in an associate justice. I'm going to let Maggie speak for herself from the remainder of the time, so I'm going to yield the floor to her, but I highly encourage you all to consider her for this position.
Am I on? Oh, I am. Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Margaret, or Maggie Hundley. First of all, I would like to thank the Howard Fawn administration for appointing me. I wouldn't be here standing in front of you without their consideration, so thank you. I'd also like to thank everyone for being here. I know it's getting late, so thank you all for giving your time. A little about me. This is my second year at Wichita State, and I am a junior majoring in political science. I'm a member of Pi Sigma Alpha, the National Honors Political Science Society, and Departmental Honors here at Wichita State. Throughout my life, I've had a passion for law and politics, so I'm very excited to have the opportunity to be a member of the Student Government Association, specifically the Supreme Court. As Associate Justice, I vow to uphold the values of WSU and hear the concerns and voice of all students. I hold it with great importance that our Supreme Court is fair, responsive, and compassionate. Moreover, I pride myself on my empathy, ethics, impartiality, and character, and all of these traits, I believe, would make a great Supreme Court Associate Justice. Once again, I would like to reiterate my gratitude to the Howard Fawn administration and all of you for listening and giving your time today. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the nominee? Okay, seeing none. Now you may clap. Okay, appointments are a little bit different than other bills that have first reads and second reads, and appointments are traditionally just given the first and second read the first time they're presented. And now we move into the debate period to talk about the candidate, pros, cons, etc. Is there anyone who'd like to speak during this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move directly into the voting procedure. Once again, hand vote.
So
Okay. All those in favor of approving this nominee, please raise your hand. All those against? Any abstentions? With an overwhelming majority, this passes. Okay, I'm looking for one specific motion to extend the time we have here so that we can get to the rest of the things. So, is there any motions? Vice President Fawn?
I move to extend the meeting to 10:30 p.m.
Is there a second? Okay, thank you. Seeing multiple. Now we'll go into the same voting procedure to extend the time. All those in favor of extending till 10:30, which we need to do, by the way, please raise your hand. Raise your hand higher, please, so we can see. All those against? Okay, all those abstaining? Okay. It does pass, which means we have now extended our time till 10:30, and we can get the rest of the items on and done tonight. Thank you. I appreciate you all. This moves us to 7.2. Act on request to approve AR-67-010 OSAT motor vehicles. Is the author here and would like to speak? You have the floor.
Just give us one moment. Her laptop is updating real quick.
Okay, I'm opting to recess for a cool 5 minutes so that we can all get a drink, go to the bathroom, those kinds of things, and give our friends here a little bit more time to get their laptop updated. So come back at 9:20.
While you guys are all moving around, I'd just like to say thank you for the engagement and deliberation on the Leadership Succession Act. I ask that all of you guys talk to your constituents this week, get some thoughts on it.
Okay, everybody, take your seats. I don't know why, ominously, like so many people are gone. We'll take, yes, please. Our wonderful clerk is just gonna go search for some people, make sure everyone gets back in their seat by the time that I told them to. Okay, I call this meeting back to order at 9:22 p.m. Testing, testing. Thank you, everybody. Now we move back to allowing the author of our association resolution bill to give their speech. Tell us about the resolution. Good stuff.
Good evening, everyone. So, in this chamber, you guys know us as Senator Foster and Senator Pang, but we are here today as Nami and Jasmine. We're students who are navigating campus life as students with chronic illness. Is it on? I was not close enough. I apologize. Anyway, so there are a lot of other students just like us who are also trying their best to navigate life on campus. And so this resolution is pertaining to one of the services that OSAT provides for students with mobility issues. And this service is mobility van rides, and yeah, they provide students with mobility issues with an alternate way of commuting across campus. And this service is underfunded, and it is not efficient in what it's supposed to do. Examples of this is that the hours of operation do not span for the total of class times, and then there are only two golf carts that they use to transport students, and they do not have lifts for the students to get on the cart, and they have no weather coverings, and those provide, or that's a huge risk to the students who utilize those vans. Is that it? That's it.
Are there any questions? Senator Knuckles?
Yeah, do you have like an estimate for how much?
Yes. So this is, like, I was shocked when I heard this number. It is $20,995 per golf cart. That is very expensive, but they have to be electric, they have to have a lift, and they have to be street legal. So that's what makes them really expensive. But the purpose of this resolution is not to use like SGA funds. It's a call on the university to take responsibility for the service.
Are there any other questions? Chairperson Bobbitt?
Like you said, it's just a call for action, but presuming this passes, what follow-through would you like to see for this resolution? Where do you see it going next?
Hopefully if this resolution passes and the university hears our calls, we hopefully have more students hear about what OSAC can do for them. I myself have mobility issues. Some of you may have seen bandages on the back of my legs. Sometimes I can't walk that well. And having this resolution helps students like myself have the privilege of going to class without having to ever worry about skipping class because I can't walk that well. So,
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Now that resolution is having its first read and being recommended to the Student Services Committee. So give a light clap for our presenters here. Now, first, before we move on, I'd like to clarify a little bit difference with our resolution types for our new senators here. Association resolutions are legislation that's used to express the sentiments of this body itself. Student Government Association, our association. You see a lot of Senate bills or Senate resolutions on the floor, not a lot of association resolutions this year. That fluctuates per Senate body about which type usually is the most popular that year. Funding bills also allocate funding, obviously, to a certain item or thing, individual funding, organizational funding, those kinds of things. It's all home in your transition guide that I gave to all of you. That'll give you an example, and as much as we've discussed funding for the motor vehicles within this resolution, as Senator Foster and Senator Pang stated, this is not actually assigning a dollar amount for us, the association, to pay. It is a call to action to the university, if that makes sense. And that is what association resolutions function as, is calling the university to do something then. And yeah, any questions about legislation types before we move on? Okay, fantastic. We will now move on to 7.3.
Act on request to approve SB-67-129 Funding Procedure Act.
Is the author here and would like to speak? You have the floor.
Hello, everybody. I know it's been forever, but coming back to you with another one. This is an attempt to kind of optimize the process of our funding processes. Like I said, it is not intended to address the issues associated with student fees and appropriations. That is a different discussion and a much lengthier resolution. This one simply seeks to handle the back end side of things and how the Senate processes through things as we receive them. What this resolution does is essentially takes individual and organization funding off of the consent agenda. It would create a presumption that anything that the Finance Commission passes is just automatically approved, unless there is a specific objection raised against it. The Senate still retains the right to object to things, but it follows the procedural norms that we have established. Where in my entire time in the Senate, I cannot recall a single instance where the Senate has not approved a individual or organizational funding act, and it's all moved to the consent agenda anyways. So essentially, it just allows the treasurer to begin the process instead of having to wait that additional time for the Senate to go through and be like, yeah, approved. Yeah.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. This will be referred to the Government Oversight Committee for their approval before it goes back to us for its second read. And now we'll move to 7.4.
Act on request to approve SB-67-130, the Legislative Council Amendment Act.
Is the author here and would like to speak? You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. Pretty short and simple bill. This bill would amend the bylaws about the Legislative Council. For those of you that don't know, the Legislative Council acts as our de facto Senate in the summer session. So they pass bills related to appointments, the student body president's budget, stuff like that. And our most experienced senators from each category would serve on legislative council. So the changes that I made in this bill would basically just change some language where the legislative council would just have to meet once during the summer session instead of twice a month. Historically, the legislative council has not needed to meet twice a month during the summer session. I know this summer we met a couple times, but nowhere near the amount of twice a month. I know last year, in talking to President Howard, they didn't need to meet twice a month either. So, the change will only have it be once during the summer session, and then I added another line to where the Speaker of the Senate can call in another session of Legislative Council when necessary. So it's not just limiting it to, no, you can only meet once a month and that's it. They can meet more than that if they need to. But I will stand for questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. That will be referred to the Government Oversight Committee for its approval, and then the second read back here. And now we'll move to 7.5.
Act on request to approve SV-67-131, authorizing an expenditure from the Special Projects and Capital Fund for the creation of a capital fund.
Is the author here and would like to speak? You have the floor.
Hey y'all. How you guys hanging in there? Happy to be here. Good deal. So this bill is basically just requesting $250,000 from the Special Projects and Capital Fund to provide additional funding to help manage the capital needs of certain entities that are funded by student fees, so that we don't have to keep funding these entities through student fees annually. So from time to time, we're presented with requests for new technology or other needs from different groups on campus who are supported through student fee dollars. And instead of making funds permanently allocated in these departments, we are advocating to just establish this fund so that it remains a central fund that different groups can pull from rather than divvying out the funding per department. So yeah, pretty straightforward, but are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Senator Robinson.
So to clarify, this is effectively a slush fund?
Who are you
I'm looking at
referring
Gabe.
it to? Okay, Gabe.
No, one of the things that I think it's something important to realize, so when we go through the student fees process every spring semester, departments, when they come up with needs for technology, for example, new computers or new technology as they kind of rotate over the institution's 5-year cycle, they put those requests in their student fees packet to request the funding for the next year. Reality is sometimes those funds are just one-time fund, but because we allocate it annually on this current basis, a 3-year cycle, then they get to keep those funds for 3 years, even if they are just spending it for the one time. And so one of the things that we've had some conversations about is how do we eliminate putting funds into areas that only need it for a one time, and to establish an actual capital fund utilized to pay for those things on a one-time basis instead of leaving it in department budgets for 3 years at a time. Similar to how other funding processes would work, requests would come in, requests would then be sent to the Senate for approval, so that we can expend some of those one-time requests instead of, again, putting it into department budgets for 2 to 3 years and leaving it in those funds. And then after they spent it for the first year, they still have those funds as they return for the next 2 years after that.
Before we continue, Gabe, Dr. Advisor Fonseca, could you explain for the body, as well as before we get into all of these funding processes, what the Special Projects and Capital Fund is and why it was established and where it is now? Oh my gosh, Treasurer Wong, please tell us.
Hi, everyone.
So just a little bit of background of what the Special Projects Fund is. The Special Projects Fund is a fund that holds about $2 million that is funded annually through every year through student fees. If you actually look at the actual bill, you'll see that the total amount of the starting balance is actually $2,037,000. It is a fund that is used for projects that may have a high cost associated for it. For example, it was utilized to help pay for the RC roof repairs, which were needed. That costed about $70,000, but obviously it was necessary. And it can also be used for other projects such as events for the campus, et cetera, et cetera. Does that help clarify? Did I answer all your questions? Okay.
Any other questions about anything to do with the capital fund, what it means, and anything like that for this? Can't see it. Give me your, okay. Senator Island.
Would requests that are sent from departments to be taken from the capital fund, would those be able to be approved via the consent agenda, or would the Senate have to approve each one of those requests individually?
Oh, okay, me? Okay, I would say that's up to the discretion of the speaker. Traditionally, funding like that from the Special Projects and Capital Fund has always been a vote, because regardless of if it was on the consent agenda or not, I almost guarantee that someone would oppose that to vote for it because it is such a large sum of money, and funding those projects like this, and especially within our Senate history and our history with funding in general, it's definitely up to the discretion of the speaker, but personally, if it happened in my year, it would definitely be something that would be voted on. But as it sits, I don't believe there's any legislation or bylaws that specifically state that they need to be voted on outside of the consent agenda. I think it's up to the discretion of the speaker. Okay, fantastic. I'm hearing a nod. Good stuff. Any other questions? Chairperson Bobbitt.
This one might be more of a question for the central office, but what safeguards are put in place to ensure that this fund is being used for what it's stating? You have stated it's for technology, but I see nothing in the actual resolution itself that explicitly earmarks. And then my kind of second question on that one is, how did we arrive at the denomination of $250,000?
Yeah, great question. So the initial, so technology is an example of what I would explain what would potentially be considered a project out of the capital fund. I would probably say, as we have navigated this conversation about how to utilize these dollars effectively, and as we have looked at where we have traditionally have seen expenditures from the student government, either through SGA itself or through the student fees process, as we look at dollar amount from a year-to-year basis, so I'm going to answer your questions probably blended together, so please make sure I answer both of them if I don't. We came to the 250 number basically looking at the last couple years as we have seen requests from departments looking at needing to upgrade technology for their departments, needing to upgrade whatever it might be that is not considered a programmatic thing or that's considered a more one-time cost. Those are how we developed the overall arching number as we kind of just, again, looked at a cycle basis of the previous 3 years. What I would say as far as the safeguards, it's because it's going to, the language in the bill actually establishes to create the capital fund. We couldn't use that money to then say, well, we want to take that to fund a programmatic thing, or we want to take that money to fund appropriations, or we want to take that money to fund certain things, because the language specifies capital fund, and then we have a current executive order that establishes the definition of capital funds for one-time technology or high equipment costs or things like that. That is what I would say some of those safeguards from there would be. I would probably also say, following, if this potentially approves as well, then to go in with some additional language to then stipulate some additional guardrails to actually legislate the executive order that's also in place, that defines what the capital fund, what a capital project is, and what it also is not.
Second question was why $250,000?
So just to clarify, yeah, so as we look at the previous 3 years of expenditures and as we've kind of evaluated where we were from the three years of departments who have requested funding, this seems to be a kind of average around number. It also allows us to put about 10% of the overall budget into that fund to allow it to continue to sit there as well. So while aspect of it were an arbitrary development of a number, it also was grounded within the review of our previous 3 years of budgets.
Are there any other questions? Chairperson Bobbitt.
Could I ask that that executive order be made available? And then could you speak to why this money should be provided by the students versus coming from other places?
Yeah, so the executive order is probably in one of the packets from a couple weeks ago, but we'll definitely re-include it into the teams. So this is specifically being earmarked for student fee funded departments. And so as a student fee funded department comes into student government, the funding comes from student fees. So for example, when we think about, we'll use the good example of the Radigan Student Center. It receives funding from, actually it's not a good example, not a knock on them, but I'll give you a better example. If Campus Recreation, which is a student fee funded department, comes into student government and say, hey, we have now hit our 5-year mark where we need to replace the 20 computers that we have in our department, it's gonna cost us $75,000 to do it. More than likely, currently, their only mechanism is to put it into their student fees request to ask for that money, and then we would go through the process to determine if we're going to fund their overall budget, and if so, then they would have 3 years of $75,000 sitting in their budgets versus just spending it for the one time and then being done from there. So I would argue that the capital fund provides a couple of options to say, we're going to pay for the one-time things that are one-time things and not not that it's been a bad practice, but not let departments hold on to 3 years of money that they really only needed to use for 1 year. And as we look at the cycle of technology, and again, I keep using technology as an example, but that's not the only aspect of it. But as we look at the process of it, technology expires every 3 to 5 years as the institutions kind of had set that parameter. And those resources, because they're funded by student fees, are then covered by student fees to pay for them. Hopefully that answers both of those questions, but I will go ahead and put it in there so that you can see it.
Okay, I have a question. So was this something that the executive branch ultimately decided needed to happen, or was this specifically a request from other administration or faculty or those kinds of things? And what was the decision-making process when this was created and brought here today?
This was a decision that was concluded through the executive branch. Matthew and Jawin and Gabriel and I looked over these. Essentially, we decided, I just completely blanked on what I was gonna say. My bad. Ultimately, when we were looking at the special projects and capital fund, we kind of broke down areas that needed to be pre-allocated, and this was one of those areas that we just collectively decided it was more beneficial to earmark this money than it was to leave it sitting there. I don't know. Gabe, do you want to speak on that more?
Yeah, I would also add, this was also presented to joint leadership, which are all of the paid members of student government who were presented with this proposal as well, to garner their feedback as we continue to process this conversation in the executive level.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, I have another one. So for a capital fund specifically, is there a reason why this was a route the executive branch wanted to go? Or was there also discussion of the potential for these kinds of one-time costs or necessities for technology could just go through the special projects and capital fund? What was the thought behind creating a specific fund for these processes separate from that initial existing fund, if that makes sense?
I guess the thought process from us was that it would just be easier to set aside this money than to leave it in that giant pool of discretionary funding. We just figured that because these entities are already student fee funded, that's why they should just keep receiving those dollars. But specifically, we thought it would be easier to transition that process by having the capital fund. Do you want to speak on that, either of you? No? Okay.
Follow-up question. Oh, I'll go Senator Pizzini, and then I'll ask my question.
My question is kind of along the lines of what you just asked. Is it the reason because the reporting or I don't understand why we need another separate fund, because I'm sure everything is itemized in the big fund. You can still give out a one-time payment from our special projects fund. Why separate it? Because it would just have another basket of money just kind of out there.
Advisor Fonseca, do you want to?
Yeah, that's a great question, Senator. And one of the things that I want to, to kind of explain is there's a separate fund in SGA's budget that holds currently the special projects fund that's no longer the $2 million because we spent some of it already. But let's just, for this purpose, just use the $2 million for now. Within that, because it's just that larger big number, one of the things that we got a request from a member of leadership was to begin earmarking dollars so that we can start to visually see what is money that is actually able to be spent in other circumstances versus what is money that we should earmark and put to the side to earmark to do that. So the request tonight, as you see some of these other pieces coming in, specifically for this one, will not establish a new fund. We'll just earmark specifically a portion of those dollars from that overall budget to then fund an actual capital fund. It isn't going to create a new budget. It isn't going to create a new line. It's just going to begin to say, as we look at the overall big number, a portion of it has already been pre-designated to fund these initiatives or to fund this particular thing, which then will come up for then the vote and approval from there. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're creating a brand new account to hold that money. It is just beginning to say, here is how we are allocating and or utilizing the resources that the students have given us in this capacity, and beginning to mark some of those dollars from there. So as future student governments look at it, or even in the spring semester when we're looking at where we have some additional dollars to spend, it will automatically take that money off and say you can't actually touch this portion of it because it's been pre-designated for this particular thing. From a budgetary standpoint, the way that student government fund or designed its budget, it makes a lot of sense to earmark dollars that should be earmarked instead of just leaving it in an overall pool for a future student government to say, well, we want to pull that and do this instead with it. So it's really from if you were putting it on an Excel sheet, it really is just to kind of clean up that overall arching $2 million that sits in that larger big account.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much. Now, our funding bills, obviously, as you see within the Senate action section, operate a little bit differently than our other bills. They have their first and final read and vote all within one day, which is why I was like, hey, get your questions in now, because we will go to debate period and vote today. So we'll move into the debate period to discuss on this item. Is there anyone who would like to speak during this time? Not a single soul? Senator Lewis.
I'd like to speak in affirmation. I think earmarking some of that larger capital fund for these specific department funds so that we don't put those requests in the budget for 3 years when they might not be needed, it'll be more efficient to just do one-time payments once.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Chairperson Bobbitt.
I think this provides us a wonderful opportunity to set some legislative guardrails in place before we start spending out money from this fund. But at this point, I do not see a problem with redesignating this specific section as a exclusively capital fund.
Is there anyone who'd like to speak against? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the debate period and we'll move into the voting period. I believe our clickers are back on track, potentially. Clerk Carter?
Yes, voting is now open. Reminder, A for yes, B for no, and C for abstain. Also, I will mention we had one senator leave, so our simple majority is now 14 instead of 15. All right, with 22 yes, 0 no's, and 3 abstentions, the motion passes.
Okay, this brings us to 7.6.
We're just going to sit up here for a while. So,
1 second. He has to read the.
My bad.
No, you're fine.
Act on request to approve SB-67-132, authorizing an expenditure from the Special Projects and Capital Fund for the student fee reserves.
Now you may go.
Thank you. So before we continue, I think we already kind of clarified a little bit, but I wanted to reiterate that all of these are one-time payments. So even if you all choose to approve all of these requests, the fund will replenish itself back up to $2 million next year because this fund is funded annually through student fee dollars. And I think a long time ago when we were pulling some money out of this for previous projects, we kind of explained that there was dollars that were pre-allocated for different things. These are those pre-allocated funds. So as it previously stood, this was just a fund of $2 million, just a pot, but we've been pre-allocating it for things that need to be paid for that have been back, things that have been on the back burner for a while. So for this next bill, it's requesting pulling $300,000 from the Special Projects and Capital Fund to reimburse the student fee reserves up to $1 million. By decree of our SGA statutes, the student fee reserves need to sit at $1 million, so this payment would just fill the fund up to $1 million. And I'm gonna have Advisor Fonseca explain what the reserves are because he can do a better job than we can.
Yeah, so the student fees reserve is a little complicated, and so I kind of want to make sure that folks understand what it is and also what it is not. So back in the early 2000s, when student government had unspent student fee dollars, so for example, they approved a fee of $11 and to 10,000 students, but we ended up getting 1,000 students. We then had money that was collected, that was not allocated, that went into this account. What student governments in the previous years did not do was not spend that money, and so they did spend it. And a couple of years ago, probably when I got here, that account was a little less than $200,000. And during COVID and some of those other areas, when we had some drastic budget decisions, we didn't have the resources to address some things, and we had to institute some budget cuts to folks to do that. The student fees reserve is purely designed to serve as a reserve to the student fees budget. So every year, student fees collects roughly about $11 million, so let's make it a whole number. And whenever there is a shortfall, therefore, resulting in enrollment, because our student fees budget is designed on enrollment, whenever there is a shortfall in enrollment or we have a random weird year where it is a drastic decrease to the allocation we have to, from a fiscal standpoint, have resources in order to address shortfalls within the student fees budget. And we're talking about the collective $11 million, not by the individual departments. What we've been doing for the past couple of years is, whether you look at it as fortunate or unfortunate. During the pandemic in 2021, with some of the COVID relief money, we were able to collect some of the COVID relief money that the institution got to pay off students' balances. And then we were able to put those dollars into the student fees reserve, allowing us to be able to get ahead of the schedule of how many annual years we're supposed to make a deposit. Our statute requires that we take a percentage of the student fees budget annually to fund the student fees reserves. For the previous 5 years, we have made decisions to not make the transfer and instead use either unspent money. And then when COVID money relief came in, that gave us about 3.5 years of money that we didn't have to make transfers for. But it becomes an argument we have every single spring semester of how we are going to put money into the student fees reserve. The current balance is roughly about $700,000, so we're close to the $1 million. And so this proposal would be to transfer money from the special projects account into the student fees reserve so that we can be done having the conversation about how we're going to fund the student fees reserve and finally stop using the student fees reserve to fund other projects and other things because we now have a special projects fund as well. The university's budget office tells us that in order to be fiscally sound, we need roughly 10% of our student fees budget in the event that we have to make transfers to other departments to deal with budget shortfalls. We had a minor budget shortfall this year, and the decision was not to make transfers because departments had those resources from unspent dollars or for their own department reserves. But again, in 2021, when we had to make a drastic budget cut of about $400,000, is where we first dipped into that account to begin dealing with some of it. So that is what it's designed to do. It is not designed to be a slush fund. It is not designed to continue to keep pulling money out of. We actually need to put money into it so that we can be, one, in compliance with our statute, which we just have suspended for the past couple years, so it's not like we're in violation of it. But two, now that we're in this position that we have the resources, the request is then to move the funds into the account so that we can finally fund that account and leave it as is and not dip into it unless we have to because we're in a budget shortfall perspective. Hopefully that explains what that account is for. I'm happy to answer any questions about the account outside of the request if you have any.
Are there any questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Thank you. We'll move into the debate period. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this item? Chairperson Bobbitt?
I will be abstaining on this vote. As much as Gabe says, or Dr. Fonseca says that this fund is not a slush fund, that is what it has been used for my entire time here in the Senate. It is the Wild West of SGA funding. I have seen hundreds of thousands of dollars fly in and out of this account, or mostly out. And I do not feel comfortable putting money into it in its current unregulated stance. Like I said, I'll be abstaining on this one, but this is an area that needs some considerable legislative restraints put on it.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during this time? Okay, I will say something also. I'm not unfamiliar with funds being taken from the student fees reserves during my time here, but I will say it has always been met with a lot of discussion, which I appreciate, but it has consistently in all my years here been a problem of how are we going to get our $1 million into this fund, and that is constantly the discussion that we have, and past legislative sessions have decided to take some funding from that to fund other things. Namely, it was a discussion of even when we approved our additional funding for appropriations this year of, are we going to use student fees reserves? And I think ultimately most people decided within Senate leadership when we had that discussion that that was not acceptable and we are not willing to do that because not only does this fund have to exist for in event of crises or in the event that we have to have this funding to cover other things. And I am not, I'm sympathetic also to any discussion or opinions and thoughts about the student fees reserves, but either way, in my personal opinion, it has to be funded at $1 million pursuant our bylaws. And if it doesn't, we are not in compliance with our own bylaws. So it's a discussion we have literally every single year, and I'm in favor of funding this, but that doesn't mean that in the future we can't also make legislative restraints for that funding. That's also something that can happen too, and I just want us to sit with what we're at here and to get a little bit more thoughts and opinions about that. So, Senator Lewis.
I'd like to speak in affirmation of this legislation. Like you said, we can put legislative restraints on it after we put money in it, and if we do put money into it, we can continue to prevent ourselves from taking money out of it. And with the uncertainty of next year and potential large crises, it may be quite necessary to keep this fund full.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak during this time? Anyone? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. We'll move into the voting. Oh, Senator Robinson.
As I'm looking through the rest of the bills, did you subtract out just from the starting balance the amount that would be left after that singular bill?
Is this a point of inquiry?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
You can feel free to answer that, but I can answer it if you would like. Okay. So traditionally for a lot of our funding bills, it goes from the amount that we originally have in the account, so that $2,037,000, and then subtracts the amount it's requesting from that. It's not necessarily other things that we have funded through that process, and each funding processes won't then subtract from that as we pass it, if that makes sense. So that number, $2,037,000, is subtracted from the amount being requested. So you see some that's 300,000, 150,000, yada, yada, yada. And then that end amount is that being subtracted from that, if that makes sense. It's, the way we have done things and, hasn't always made the most sense, but that's where it exists. Does that make sense, or did that answer your question?
Yes, that does. So, Kaylee, then, or President Hauer, would that mean that if everything passed tonight, we would have $1,155,000 in the account when we're done?
I'll allow that question. Do you have or would you like to revert it back to Advisor Fonseca?
I will get you that number here shortly, but yeah, they didn't necessarily change the current balance to articulate every bill being passed because it depends on the bill being passed. So that current balance would be, if this one bill passes, this is what the new current balance will be. I'll do the math really quick of all the things that get through to let you know at the end at the meeting what the current balance of that account will have.
Okay, just a reminder, we are in the debate period, no, technically, we moved to the voting period. So, any other questions and thoughts before we do that? Great, fantastic.
Voting is now open. With 19 yes, 5 no, and 2 abstentions, the motion passes.
You all can do better than that, I swear. I know that we're not feeling our best, but come on. Okay, now we'll move on to 7.7.
Act on request to approve SB-67-133, authorizing an expenditure from the Special Projects and Capital Fund to reimburse the reserves for the final payment of the bond for the Radican Student Center.
You have the floor.
Okay, so I know that title is a really full title. I'm so sorry, but to explain, last year we pulled $45,000 from the reserves to pay the final bond payment for the RSC. And now that $45,000 is not in the reserves, so we're just taking $45,000 from the Special Projects Fund back into the reserves so we can replenish it from when we used it last year. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay, great. And we will stand for questions.
Are there any questions? I have one. Obviously, for the other authorization in question, for the $300,000 and the $45,000, were those calculated based on each other's summarizations or separately?
They should be separate.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. We'll move into the debate period. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Okay, I see we're grinding to a halt here. Seeing none, we'll move to the voting period.
Voting is now open. With 25 in favor, 1 against, and 0 abstentions, the motion passes.
Thank you all. Now we'll move to 7.8.
Act on request to approve SB-67-134, authorizing an expenditure from the Special Projects and Capital Fund to support the Division of Student Affairs.
Is the author here and would like to speak?
Yes.
You have the floor.
So This bill's requesting $150,000 from the Special Projects and Capital Fund to provide additional support to the Division of Student Affairs due to the budget shortfall in fiscal year '24. This would be utilized to provide support for programs and services that the Department of Student Affairs
I'm
provides.
sorry, I have to interrupt you to ask you to speak a little bit more
Sorry,
slowly. Just to be a little bit
Yep.
more accessible
Yep.
for, okay, thank you.
I'll restart. $150,000 from the Special Projects and Capital Fund to provide additional support to the Division of Student Affairs due to their budget shortfall. This would be utilized to fund the programs and other services that Student Affairs provides to students on campus. But I will be yielding the rest of the floor to our Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs, Scott Jensen, to answer any questions or explain further.
Sorry, I'm old. I don't know how to use technology. Thank you all for bearing with us this evening, and I appreciate you all spending time hearing about this proposal. So I'm going to give a really brief overview of what I do. I have the opportunity to work with Katie Austin, who you all heard from earlier in housing. I work with Dr. Advisor, Executive Director Fonseca, and I work with John Lee in his role as Director of Campus Recreation. And then finally, I work with our Director of Business Operations, Emily Zimmerman, in Student Affairs. And so what we do every year in Student Affairs, starting about 5 years ago, Dr. Hall agreed not to take student fees anymore from this group and instead would fund things through reserves from the individual departments. Do I have that right? Thank you, Gabriel. That amount that she agreed to was $150,000. And so every year, Emily and I look at each department and where they end the year and where their reserves are to determine what amount each should proportionally fund that $150,000 to. And as President Hauer stated, this year there was a budget shortfall. And so each department was left at the end of the year with a little less than I think they feel extremely comfortable with. And so for us to go back and pull reserves this year would put them in a tighter bind than they normally would be when we pull that. And again, I believe this body mandates a 10% threshold that they hold in their reserves. And for us to stick with that, it would put some of our pulls out of proportion and we'd be pulling some really, really close. And we're just a little nervous about that. And so just to answer, I'm going to pre-answer some questions that might exist out there is what does this $150,000 fund? And so about 3 years ago when counseling and psychological services was seeing an extreme crisis with keeping their counselors employed on campus because there was an extreme pull on those folks out in the community. They were trying to do some things to retain them on campus, and some of that was through salary. And so the director of the office at that time worked with HR to get some of their staff a little bit of an increase in wages. It didn't get them all the way to what is out there in the community, but it helped retain them on campus because we know that there's some benefit that they saw in working with college students and all of that. And so that's about $100,000 each year that we didn't want to come back to student fees to ask for that, so Student Affairs utilized those funds in that capacity. They used an additional about $30,000 to help fund a position in Hope Services at about that same time. And again, if Dr. Provines was up here speaking from the wellness area, she says that counseling services treats the fish. When a fish is ill, they treat the fish. What prevention services does is treat the water. They try and make this a safer and more comfortable place on campus. And so that's where Hope Services was developed to do the work they do. Some of the other things that we transfer money out to, we transfer $10,000 to help cover the first gen court ceremony, and we transfer $10,000 to help fund Chakras After Dark. So what's happening is we're pulling in money and then basically just transferring it back out to different areas. And so this ask is a one-time request for us not to have to pull back from areas and to fund those areas through this $150,000. I will be silent now for a while and stand for questions.
Are there any questions? Chairperson Bobbitt.
Okay, I have two kind of questions on that. The first one is, why should students take on the responsibility of funding this initiative? And then the second one is, why should we transfer it to the department when instead we could just transfer it directly to the organizations you outlined?
As stated earlier about why students, these are all the areas that we're talking about are all student fee funded areas already. And so we feel like it lines up with it. And if it wasn't pulled from this pot, we would pull it from reserves that were already funded through student fees. So it's already it's student fee money one way or the other, if that makes sense. To answer the second question, if you all want to designate to directly transfer it to those departments, that's fine, because that's exactly what will happen is, well, let me rephrase that. The money's already been transferred so that they can meet their budget, and we could provide this body with those transfers. Emily Zimmerman could provide that to show that it's basically just reimbursing the transfers that I spoke of that already happened. Does that answer? Okay.
Any other questions? Senator Barnes.
So you mentioned a couple years back you increased some of the salaries. Is that what caused the shortfall, or was there another reason that you had a shortfall?
Sorry. Yeah, the shortfall that we're speaking of is student fees this year as a whole came in a little less than what was anticipated for the budget. That's the shortfall we're speaking of, not an overall budget shortfall. Does that answer that? Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We'll move into the debate period. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Senator Mallard.
Sorry, I'll be speaking in affirmation, like was stated, that this is for the students, and we are here to support the students, and if we can do anything to fund them, that'd be great, as well as I think we would be in agreement that it would be nice to kind of see that document that was stated of where all it's going, just to see it. But yes, I am I cannot speak right now. I am in affirmation. Yes.
Is there anyone else? Senator Henley.
I'm also for affirmation for this bill, or for the money. I think these student services are really important, especially because a lot of them focus on mental health. And as we all know, our students are really struggling right now, and I think they do need extra money for that.
Is there anyone who'd like to speak against this bill? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the debate period because we're inching towards that time, folks. And open the voting period.
Voting is now open. With 23 in favor, 20. We have more votes than we have senators. It passes, but certain numbers will be figured out later. We have 27 votes and 26 senators.
Let us
so,
redo that vote,
yeah.
folks.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, now vote. Please only click your clicker.
Okay, briefly, 1 second.
Okay, 24 yes, one no, and 2 abstentions.
Oh, yeah, okay, appropriate. Okay, we're inching to that time, and I think that a lot of people might have opinions about this last one. So I would be in favor of a 15-minute extension if someone could potentially. Okay, Senator Robertson.
I motion to extend the time for the meeting by 14 minutes.
Is there a second? Okay, seeing multiple, we'll move into the voting period.
Okay, voting's open. With 19 yes, 7 no, and 1 abstention, the motion passes.
I'm sorry to, oh, that's fine. I'm sorry to do it to all of you, but we have to get through this. Okay, we'll move to 7.9.
Act on request to approve SB-67-135, authorizing an expenditure from the Special Projects and Capital Fund for the construction of the pickleball courts.
Is the author here and would like to speak? Yes, you have the floor.
Okay, last one of the night, and then I will get out of your hair. This bill's requesting pulling $137,000 from the Special Projects and Capital Fund to fund the additional costs associated with the construction of the new pickleball courts. So for context, due to the expansion of Wilkins Stadium, the Heskett Center pickleball courts are going to have to be relocated, and the location that Student Affairs has selected, or University Leadership, I guess I should say, there's a statue there that needs to be moved. So Student Affairs is requesting $137,000 to remove this statue. I will be yielding the floor to Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs, Scott Jensen, to answer any further questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna give a little bit more context to this, if that's all right. And just for the holistic notion of the pickleball courts, and I heard Senator Mallard's concerns earlier, and I understand that completely. I get it's frustrating that we sunk money into something that is now going away. And having done that before, I was director of housing at Fairmount Towers, and I had just installed new Wi-Fi, and then we decided to tear it down. And it's no fun to spend money and see it go away for the sake of progress. And I guess that's one thing we have to look at is the holistic project of Wilkins Stadium is a step in the right direction as it relates to our softball program. Unfortunately, it's at the expense of something that John Lee, were he given the opportunity to stand up here, would say that he may not even regret doing what he did by putting in the pickleball courts and the futsal court, because it's created an incredible gathering and connection space for students that he does not want to see go away. And it hurts his heart and it hurts his soul a little bit to not have it going on right now, because when he goes out there in the evening, and as he contacted me as a supervisor to plead and talk about how do we have these courts not be lost through this project. And so we started back in the fall talking with the university leadership about the relocation, basically just rebuilding pickleball courts somewhere on campus, right about the same time that the campus master plan came out. And one of the things that we were excited to see is right where we're locating them outside of Hubbard is where they had already sort of planned to build 6 pickleball courts in the future. And so John and I were like, cool, we're not gonna have to worry about this, it's already set. Now, as those of you who heard the master plan, that's a plan, and there's no necessarily money set aside for it right now. And John and I didn't want to wait and see where that money is going to come from. We kind of pushed forward. And the president also strongly desired for some pickleball courts to continue on as soon as possible. And so the university allocated $250,000 to this project, and Student Affairs allocated $50,000. And as President Hauer stated, we went out to bid and we got pretty close, and there was a concern raised, I think, by a combination of this body and others, that the location was going to be at a spot where some significant trees, older trees on campus were going to be taken down. And so as we moved the project, it created a need to move the statue. And so when we went back out to bid, the cost of the total cost of the project exceeded our budget by $136,000, give or take. And so that's the money that we're requesting from students. And I'm going to try and answer some questions before we get it, is why should this fall on the shoulders of students? And I don't have I'm going to be honest, I don't have a great answer to that. It's a frustrating situation. It is It is a project that is directly for students, and we know that it is a project that will benefit students. We know it's something that is a demand of students and that is utilized by students. It's not a wish, it's not a hope. When John sort of went under, if they build it, they will come, for those of you who are fans of Field of Dreams, and they came, and it's used a lot, and we just don't want that to go away. And so we know this is putting it on the shoulders of you all again, who gave John some money initially to do the project that was done, and we're just asking for this not to be lost, because right now the project is hinging on us securing funding. And so the bid is done, we just need to secure the funding, and then we'll be able to move forward with the construction.
Are there any questions? Senator Williams.
So can I get the clarification again that we're being asked to cover the expenses specifically because the planned site for the pickleball courts has moved?
Yeah, I mean, that increased the overall scope of the project.
Senator.
Hold on, and let me clarify. Like, that has added significantly to the cost, but we didn't have a final bid with the $300,000 budget. We may have had a small overrun, but that increased it significantly.
Senator Henley.
Is there a backup plan if we vote no to this?
I don't know. I mean, the backup plan could be that the pickleball courts don't exist, or that we look for other areas to try and gain funding from. But right now, there is not a plan B at this point, because the funds allocated from student affairs pretty much exhausted their ability to continue to contribute. And John would say he doesn't have any additional funds within campus recreation to contribute. So, you know, this is sort of our backup plan. Unfortunately, our first plan, when we wanted the pickleball courts built, we didn't want to come to you because we knew it was frustrating. And so that's why Student Affairs allocated the 50, and we're hoping not to. So this is kind of our backup plan.
Any other? Senator Pizzini.
Is there no other place that the pickleball courts can be located that don't involve removing anything, trees, statues? And because what I understand is that this $137,000 is to remove a statue. Is that correct?
It covers part of, I mean, that is a big piece of the overall additional cost. That is a big part of it. So you, was that the end of your question? I just want to address the question.
I do have.
Senator Pizzini, I'll allow it. Follow up.
I just think that it would be easier and more feasible to just keep looking for an alternate location instead of looking for more funding. That's, in this climate, it's already difficult to find funding. I think it's easier with our big, beautiful campus to find another location.
Senator Pizzini, do you have a question for that?
How difficult would it be to find a location that is not the one that you're proposing?
I heard the question. I got you. So obviously it is directly adjacent to the Heskett Center, so there's some advantage to that as students utilizing the courts do check out equipment that is utilized on the court. So that's one advantage to the location that's being proposed. The second is, again, that was the location that was identified by us because of the location adjacent to the Heskett Center. But then when we saw the campus master plan, and that was the plan in the master plan for where playing fields would be, it just made sense to just have this be the first thing that's being put in as part of the campus master plan to start moving that forward. So in addition to it just making sense, because that doesn't really, are there other places? There might be, but not ones that probably make as much sense as this one, if that makes sense.
Any other questions? Senator Lewis.
If we do allot this funding, where will the statue be moved?
I would love to give you that answer. Emily Patterson, who's our Executive Director of Facilities Planning on campus, I think does an amazing job on campus of allocating art throughout campus. And I know she has a plan, probably on a good place for a different pickleball. I'm just kidding. But they're very intentional about where art and statues go. And I don't know the answer to that, so I don't want to lie, but I'm sure she has a plan.
Any other questions? Senator Carlson.
So if this does get approved, what are the effects it might have on campus traversability with all the construction? Because there's already quite a bit of construction going on campus. So how would this impact the current places to walk around on campus?
That's an excellent question. I know that's something that Emily worries about a lot. If you look even at the construction going on at Wilkins, they've tried to keep the fence in a way that you can still utilize that sidewalk. And I believe that this same consideration would be taken into place for those sidewalks that go between Hubbard and Heskett and Hubbard and Lindquist. So I feel like that was a political answer to your question. I don't mean to be that, but I just want to give Emily Patterson her credit for trying to manage that very thing with everything that we said. But having seen this done, we added a pickleball court over at the Flats and housing, and I think it's a pretty quick project, for one, to pour the concrete, and I don't think it's incredibly intrusive. Hopefully that helps answer that question.
Senator Island.
Given that the process for the installation of the courts themselves is relatively quick, as you stated, what are the campus recreation hesitations, or what necessarily is keeping you all from just waiting until Hubbard is removed to begin the project?
So Hubbard's removal is in the campus master plan, but that could be 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, or no, never, right? And so we could wait, and we could save up money through time. But in that interim, then that's 3, 4, 5 years that students don't have this opportunity. So that's the concern for me of waiting.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes, so I'm going to end the questioning period there and hope that someone moves to extend it by like 5 minutes. Come on, team. I'm sorry, huh? One person speak. Senator Pang.
It was extended by 14 minutes earlier.
Okay, what time does that make it? Okay, stunning. I did the wrong math there. Okay, thank you, team. I appreciate you. I'm tired. Yeah, thank you. Okay, never mind. We have time. Good stuff. So I'll move it back to questions, considering that I was wrong about the timing, so that people can continue to ask questions. Senator Lewis.
When would the construction begin? Because, I'm thinking about environmental factors like how dusty it could get when digging out for the foundation, and if that's at a bad time of the year, that could be harmful for students.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would love to be able to say I know how concrete works and all of that, but I know you have to be very specific about when you pour concrete with temperatures as we're getting close to winter. So it would have to fit a window that would allow it. Right now, like I said, we have an approved bid, a final bid. We just have to finalize funding, and then once funding is finalized, then we'd begin working with the construction company on the actual process. So that then leaves our hands and goes into Emily Patterson's hands, who would make sure all of those things that you're talking about are well under consideration.
Any other questions? Senator Siddiqui, please tell me if that was wrong or correct.
It's Siddiqui, so it's kind of the same. But so 7 minutes away from campus, there is a WSU cricket ground, and there's only like a very small area of that ground that's actually being used to play, and most of it is covered by just grass. So why don't you think about using that area for the pickleball courts?
That's an excellent question. My understanding is, I know where you're speaking of, and my understanding is that's a Wichita public park, and they've allocated us space to put the cricket pad on it. And we worked with Mayor Wu on that project. And so we don't actually own that ground. It wouldn't be our ground, and it wouldn't allow us to limit the use of that to WSU students and WSU guests. And it would be pretty far for some of our students to go out there to utilize that facility. So I think that's why that wasn't chosen.
In addition, a lot of organizations and agencies here on campus utilize those pickleball courts just for general events, meetings, etc. And also when taking into consideration of a court 7 minutes away, there are students here on campus that don't have cars that rely on public transportation. Maybe that public transportation doesn't actually reach to those parts of Wichita. So also taking that into consideration when we're talking about constructing a pickleball court on campus. Why that's important is because a lot of organizations do currently utilize it, and not having access to it does prevent those organizations who were utilizing it from being able to hold their events.
Any other questions? Senator Keller.
As you said, the university master plan already had courts placed there. Was there any reason that the university itself was not planning or does not have funds allocated to this, or was it later in the plan?
No, that's a fair question. Again, I think President Muma would say this as well, is I think the university has developed a great long-term plan for what the university, an aspiration for what the university could be. And right now, these are part of that. And so there's not money allocated or even we don't know where that money is going to come from to make all these things happen. And so these being one of them. And the reason for me not to wait, and I just go back to it, is we could wait. We absolutely could wait. And we could try and save up money over the years. Hopefully that the university dollars that they've allocated would continue to stay there and save up to do it. It's just whether or not we want to see our students not have this opportunity here on campus in the interim, because our goal would be to have them up and ready to go by spring when the weather gets good enough to have students out there playing again. So it's just whether or not we want them now or we want to wait for a long time. And the price could go up, and we have a price locked in now. So hopefully that answers that question.
Okay. Give me your placard. Type Senator Beatty. I knew it. Okay.
So I see that it is currently in the plan to tear down the Heskett Center. I know it's a plan, so that's not guaranteed. Would there be any concern that if we tore down the Heskett Center, that then we would again tear down the pickleball courts to move it to where a new recreation center would be?
This will be the shortest answer you get. No. If we build them, they will stay there.
Okay, I'm going to opt to end the questioning period here because I presume we have a lot of feelings and opinions, and I would like to give us time for the debate period, but you all can go sit down. Thank you all. We can do a light something. Okay, cute. Now I move us to the debate period. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Senator Williams.
So I'm speaking against this bill because I'm rather concerned that the university is asking us to pay for improvements to the campus, at least in part because we advocated for a change in said improvements. Our job here is to speak on behalf of students and make sure that their voices are heard, not to be the financial backbone of the university. The university's budget is somewhere north of $600 million. That's over 60 times the amount that we dole out in student fees. It's the president's, if the president administration is he seriously suggesting that, we pay for everything that we wish to see on this campus? During the SGA town hall, MUMA highlighted campus renovations because they're focused on student success. How are we supposed to take them seriously when students are telling the administration what we need to be successful? And every time we do that, we're asked to pony up the funds to do it. And, don't get me wrong, we already do put our money where our mouth is. When we wanted to provide free menstrual products to WSU students, we paid for it. But if we are asking the university to prioritize student interests during major changes on our campus, why is that our obligation to financially support? Why is it not the university's moral and professional duty to act in the best interests of the student body? It's a little disheartening for President Muma's administration to push us to pay for changes just because we spoke up with concerns. President Muma speaks a lot about how much he loves hearing from students, and how much he wants to hear more from them, but maybe I'm misinterpreting that. Maybe he never actually said that he wants to hear from student voices, and I just improperly cited him on that one. That's it.
Anyone else who would like to speak? Vice President Fawn.
Hearing Sir Williams' concerns, President Muma has always cared about hearing about student voices. He brought this to us when they proposed the idea originally, and we went over a bunch of questions that they had. I think it's our responsibility to listen to the students, but with their concerns that the university would make us pay or have us pay for every improvement that could possibly be done on campus, I don't think that's a thing that will happen every time. I think we raised the concern about the pickleball courts, and them seeing that we can help do that in a more efficient manner where we don't have to wait for the pickleball courts over a course of several years. I think that's a good thing that they brought it to us so that we can actually consider that. If you guys don't support this bill, that's perfectly fine, that's your choice. But the students have asked for pickleball courts, they want pickleball courts. And if we disagree on that, that's okay, but I think with the university, they have been very supportive of hearing student feedback regarding pickleball courts and other initiatives.
Okay. Anyone speaking against this legislation, please raise your hand. Senator Pizzini.
I'm going to speak against, with respect to President Fawn's last remark. I would love pickleball courts. I don't think we should pay for it. I believe that it is more for the, again, yes, the students will be using it. But like the gentleman was saying earlier, and some of our senators have mentioned tonight, there are other more pressing concerns on campus that could really use $137,000. We can employ more counselors to provide mental health services and support our students. I understand that the pickleball courts are popular right now, and maybe 5 years from now it'll be something different in a different sport, and I'm sure 5 years before was something else. Again, I don't believe that we should be paying for this project. I believe if it's really necessary or if it's really wanted, and I think the university is more than capable to find the funds.
Okay. Anyone speaking in favor of this resolution? Senator Barnes.
Yes, I'm speaking in favor. Last year, I went to the pickleballs nearly every single day, and there were probably, I probably had to wait for about a half an hour to 45 minutes each time I wanted to play pickleball. Our student body is very favorable with pickleball. They enjoy it. It's an activity you can get outside and go do. I understand that this is a lot of money to take on immediately, but I do trust our process and that we can seek out maybe a reimbursement from the university in the future to see if they'll refund us for the money we would have spent on the pickleball courts. Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak on this in the limited time that we have? I'm going to go Chairperson Bobbitt, and then we have to end the debate period.
I want to echo the sentiments that Senator Mallard expressed earlier. I think it's important that we keep in mind this is a problem of athletics creation. when the renovations on the courts were initially going on, John Lee, the director of campus recreation, ran it up the flagpole. He got approval from administrators and all the relevant parties across the university, only to arrive at the end of the process and have someone from athletics inform him that he had just renovated courts in the new home of Wilkins Stadium. The entire time this was going through the pipeline, no one from athletics stepped up and said, hey, this is a bad investment. They were still circling the wagons, getting things together for their stadium projection, and they cost the students time and money on a project that could have gone somewhere else. And it's important that we consider the fact that the students just paid to bail out athletics. We had our fees increased to make up for poor financial decisions from the athletics department. As we look at it, athletics is the one who are destroying the court. They should pay a section of putting new ones back up. As for alternative locations, the master plan calls for the statue to be removed anyways. So it is not fair to ask the students to take on the responsibility. And then we currently have a perfectly lovely vacant lot in between the YMCA, the dorms down there, and Woosley Hall that in the master plan is slated to become a parking lot. It sits next to the future home of campus recreation, and I believe that would be an excellent alternative site for these courts.
Thank you. Unless someone wants to move to extend the time, I am opting to end the debate period here, and we'll move directly into the voting period.
Voting is now open. With 6 yes, 16 no, and 5 yes, 17 no, and 5 abstentions, the motion fails.
There's no need to clap for a failed bill. Thank you. I understand we're a little in a mood. Okay, so we're moving directly to Section 8 adjournment. I adjourn this meeting at 10:42 p.m. You're free.